the state of Texas 24/7. This is TXCN, Texas Cable News.
From Austin to Abilene, you're watching Texas Cable News. I'm Alexa Economos. Thank you for joining us. Jury selection begins today for the competency hearing for Andrea Yates. She's the Houston area mother accused of drowning her 5 children. Her lawyers say they will pursue an insanity plea. A hearing is scheduled tomorrow to determine if she is mentally fit to stand trial. And also near Houston, a day in court for a young mom accused of trying to sell her baby. Witnesses say Tiffany Zimmerman tried to sell her only child at a grocery store parking lot Sunday, saying that she needed money. CPS has temporary custody of the baby, and Tiffany's mother and grandmother don't believe that she actually did it.
She loves that baby so much. That was the longest 9 months of her life waiting for that baby to come.
But police say Tiffany even admitted to committing the crime. She's now being held at the Harris County Jail on $5,000 bond. Texas homeowners are expected to make valid claims of at least $780 million this year for water and mold damage. Now, that is up 60% from last year, so insurance companies are asking the state for help or say that they may be forced to drastically raise premiums. Consumer groups are urging insurance commissioners not to make any hasty decisions that would leave homeowners unprotected. A hearing is planned this week in Houston. And more mold problems, this time, though, an outbreak at San Antonio Public Schools. It was discovered in 3 Northeast Independent School District elementary schools during a routine inspection. The schools in question were built in 1997. Well, now school board members and construction engineers are discussing a plan of action.
We're going to seal the external block, the split-face CMU, with a water repellent.
Each room, if we do find mold in the walls, then we will move that class to another room while the abatement process is going to happen.
Letters from principals have already been sent home to parents detailing the procedures, and meetings will be held for the next 3 days for concerned parents with questions. An underage drinking case against one of President Bush's daughters has been dropped. 19-year-old Barbara Bush was ticketed in May at an Austin Mexican restaurant with twin sister Jenna. Well, yesterday, the minor in possession charges were dismissed because Barbara completed 8 hours of community service. She attended an alcohol awareness class, paid a court fine, and stayed out of trouble for 3 months. Houston has its own version of Chicago's cow parade. You can find 325 cows scattered around town, dressed to the nines. But the works of art received more attention yesterday after one was stolen. KOTU-TV's Jeremy Diesel reports on the cow caper.
There's nothing unusual about seeing a couple hundred head running around Texas. Generally not right downtown or up the street, but it's not the cows about town that are the mystery. It's the one that got away. Rustled, you might say, right out of its boots.
Someone came out here, like the construction cow, said they wanted it. I don't know. It's some kind of prank that's not funny.
Kate Riley spent more than 100 hours building the cow called Utter Construction. She was screwed to a platform, staked to the ground. Not enough to keep her safe. The cow vanished around 2:15 a.m. Monday. Not without a trace.
I saw 2 guys, and I'm not sure if there were any more, and they picked up the cow and put it in the back of the pickup truck.
Oh my God! It's just not a cow!
These guys, now giving it back. A little worse for wear. Easy does it. Jared Clark and Ryan Burnett say they're no rustlers. They just stumbled across the cow, far from its grazing site.
We almost ran over because it's sitting out on the road, so
they took it home.
And then today we hear the news, and we're like, that's the cow that we have. We need to call somebody and tell them they can have their cow back.
So they called the police. It could be a felony theft. But so far, no charges have been filed. Artist Kate Riley is just happy to see her hard work headed home.
Be a part of the magic. Don't take away from it. You know, go and enjoy them and look at them and touch them, interact with them. They're great, but don't take them.
Jeremy Diesel, Texas Cable News.
More to come still here on Texas Cable News, but first, time to update your forecast with Brian Fowler over at the Texas Weather Center.
Thank you. Let's look at a few clouds out there this morning, but otherwise it is pretty quiet here in Texas. Let's check it out for you on the satellite, and as you'll see, most of the clouds today will be in West Texas. Now, then we are under a ridge of high pressure, and that's why the clouds in motion are moving in that clockwise fashion there. Because we are under a ridge, that's also going to keep us dry for the most part. Temperatures out there with a southeast wind across North Texas, 65 degrees. We're looking at a northeasterly breeze into the southern parts of the state. 69 Houston, 72 right now in San Antonio. North Texas today, lots of sunshine, 87 degrees, 86 in Austin. Our overnight lows dropping in the low 60s again, 89 in Houston today, 87 San Antonio. Lows there about 65 tonight, 85 this afternoon in El Paso. Tonight we drop down to about 63 degrees. Is this cool, mild weather going to continue? We'll let you know. It's coming up in the 5-day forecast in 10 minutes. On Texas Cable News, TXCN.
Today's forecast, part of Texas weather every 10 minutes on TXCN.
From Plano to Denton down to Louisville too. Huffines has it.
It's model year closeout time at the all-new Huffines Dodge Plano and Huffines Dodge Louisville. Pay just $18,999 on new 2001 Huffines Dodge Grand Caravan SEs, or pay just $19,995 on new 2001 Huffines Dodge Durangos at the all-new Huffines Dodge Plano at Plano Parkway in Ohio in Plano, and Huffines Dodge Louisville on I-35 in Louisville.
I can't believe I waited so long to ask my doctor. It was just a couple of toenails, except they were all sick-like and yellow.
I tried treating it myself from the outside. Nothing worked. So finally I just asked him. You know what he told me? It's an infection.
An infection? One that lives deep inside and under the nail.
He told me about Lamisil tablets. It's a prescription medicine that treats it deep in there where the infection lives, not just on the surface. Nails it from the inside out. And it's the #1 prescription for this infection.
After 3 months of treatment, I saw clear nails starting to grow.
I saved $5 just by calling for this free kit.
Lamisil isn't for people with liver or kidney problems. Rarely serious side effects on the liver or serious skin reactions have occurred, so your doctor may do blood tests. Other side effects, including headache, diarrhea, indigestion, and rash, were generally mild.
Hey, you can't treat this yourself from the outside. You gotta see the doctor and ask him if Lamisil tablets are right for you.
Lamisil tablets. Call now for your free kit and $5 savings.
What are Texans talking about today? Tune in and find out weekdays at 4 o'clock on Texas Now. It's a fresh look at Texas news, sports, and weather.
Here comes that front. More activity along that early Thursday morning.
And we'll hear from you about the day's topic on the Singular Wireless Texas Talkback line.
We have Kenneth in Dallas on the line.
Sean in Temple.
William in Killeen.
Texas Now, featuring the Singular Wireless Texas Talkback line. Weekdays at 4 o'clock, only on Texas Cable News.
This is the Texas Business Report on TXCN.
We are heading into a critical time on Wall Street as earnings news will become even more important in the coming weeks. Lori Rothman explains now in today's Bloomberg Business Report.
Good morning. Earnings pre-announcement season is just around the corner. Many companies have yet to tell investors that sales or profits will miss expectations. This morning, 2 chip companies are out with fresh financial guidance. Xilinx says its second quarter sales will fall 20 to 25% from the previous quarter. This is in line with the company's previous forecasts. But on the flip side, Vitesse Semiconductor said it will post a wider than expected fourth quarter loss. Vitesse said companies are ordering fewer chips because of an inventory glut and decreased spending. This is the third straight quarter the company has lowered its targets. The Dow and Nasdaq ended Monday's session little change. However, the S&P 500 rose for the first time in 5 sessions. Investors snapped up drug stocks like Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb. There's optimism their profits will hold up even as the economy slows. Here's a look at the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was virtually unchanged. The S&P 500 rose 6 points, lifting the index from a 3-year low it touched Friday, while the Nasdaq Composite Index tacked on 7 points. Newport Corporation is on our list of stocks to watch today. The telecom equipment maker says it's firing 10% of its workforce. This is the company's second round of job cuts in the last 2 months. And that's the latest in business at the New York Stock Exchange. I'm Lori Rothman with the Bloomberg Business Report.
Your forecast is coming up in just a few minutes, but first in sports, the Dallas Stars get ready to start training camp as head coach Ken Hitchcock receives a reward for a job well done. Stay tuned, sports is coming up next.
My friend wants to know if that girl will go out with him. Pass it down.
Hey, Grandma, ask the girl on the end if
From Plano to Denton down to Louisville too. Popeyes has it. Come on down, we'll prove it to you. Popeyes has it. Service, selection, savings, and more. Feel the excitement when you walk through our door. Popeyes has it. Popeyes has it.
For the ride, for the handling, for the comfort, Toyo Tires. For the car enthusiast who expects a higher level of performance, Toyo is the brand of choice. An opinion seconded by the world's finest automakers, including Toyota, Nissan, Infiniti, Mazda, Mitsubishi, and Porsche, who each use Toyo for a smoother, better handling ride. Ask your dealer about Toyo, the tires driven to perform.
Visit Ham's Tires in Dallas and in Fort Worth on Denton Highway.
When you have money problems, just going to the mailbox can be frightening. It's the same when the phone rings. You know it's another creditor. I thought bankruptcy was the only way out. Then I called Ameridebt.
Every day, Ameridebt helps more people with money problems. We're a nonprofit organization offering free consultations to consumers seeking to eliminate their debt.
Now my balances are dropping, and I only have one small monthly payment.
Call this number regardless of your situation. Ameridebt, helping America get out of debt.
This is TXCN Sports.
Last year, Mario Lemieux returned to hockey with great success, and now it appears that Michael Jordan is about to do the very same in basketball. After months of rumors, reports from Chicago say that His Airness will make an announcement at a news conference within the next 10 days. In the meantime, training camp is about to start at the American Airlines Center for the Dallas Stars. And for head coach Ken Hitchcock, it'll be a place he'll call home for a while. Here is Rich Pimenko now with TXCN Sports.
It's time for the Stars to drop the puck on another season, and on Monday the organization rewarded head coach Ken Hitchcock with a 3-year contract extension.
It's a good feeling when you know that I've been in this business a long time, but for me, when you have longevity with one team, that was the goal that that Bob and I started out with, was to be a one-team coach.
Well, I think it was really no surprise. I think he was going to stay here for the next little while. I think we all realize what a great job he's done, and he's hard and demanding, like a coach should be, but again, he knows when to push and when to lay off. So it's been great for the organization, for the city.
The Cowboys will try to duplicate their effort from Week 1 on Sunday in Detroit, and make no mistake, Dallas wants to win.
I'd see us play a whole lot better offensively than what we did yesterday. I think the most important thing for us to do, though, is to try to eliminate those mistakes that we made yesterday, the turnovers, and try to do a better job of running the football as well.
Usually people think, okay, they was emotionally high for that game, the next game they're going to be the regular Cowboys or whatever. That wasn't just emotion. I don't want people to think, and I don't definitely want our team to think, especially young guys, to think we was emotionally high, that's why we were able to do those things. That's what we expect.
I feel that there are a lot of things that we can build on out of this football game, and I'm just getting a little tired of building. I want to win.
Meanwhile, the Texans, who don't play till next year, don't want to end up like Cleveland, as Bob McNair talks over expansion rules with the NFL.
We don't expect miracles in the first year, but by the third year, I want us to be competitive, and I want the league to have a plan that would allow us to do that.
The Rangers were in Northern California to face one of the hottest teams in baseball, the swinging Oakland Athletics, and rookie Aaron Mayette gets pounded early. In fact, the first 6 hitters would reach base to help build a 4-0 lead. Then Jeremy Giambi ended Aaron Mayette's night in the second inning with his 2-run homer, his 12th of the year. Meanwhile, Oakland lefty Barry Zito was simply dominant, allowing only 2 hits until the 9th inning, when Michael Young sends one to the opposite field for a home run, keeping the Rangers from being shut out for the first time this season. But the A's do go on to win it anyway, 7-1. Rich Pimenko, TXCN Sports.
From Garland to Waco, this is Texas Cable News. Time now for an update on the forecast for your part of Texas.
We are looking at some rain out there today. It's just not in Texas. As you can see, most of it is on the East Coast. We're looking at a few rain showers just north of Montana as well. Elsewhere across the nation, it is dry today. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening back here at home. A lot of cloud cover in West Texas. That's going to help keep our temperatures a little bit cooler for Midland and El Paso. A southeast wind developing across North Texas, and clear skies will only help to warm those temperatures up. In fact, your high in Dallas and Fort Worth today, about 87 degrees. The same goes for San Antonio. 89 on the coast in Houston. Will be 85 in El Paso. This is great weather we are experiencing. Temperatures are just at or just below normal for this time of the year across most cities in the state. We'll be about 89 even in Brownsville and 88 in Amarillo. By Wednesday morning, again, no big changes out there. We'll see some rain to our west and to our east. Morning lows in the 60s, a little bit warmer in Brownsville at 73, and a tad bit cooler in Amarillo at 57 degrees. Wednesday afternoon's highs about 90 degrees, Dallas and Fort Worth. As you can see, we gradually warm up a little bit more as we head through the work week. That front has already moved on through. Temperatures warming up behind it now, unfortunately. 89 San Antonio, and in Houston will be 87 El Paso. Now then, on your extended forecast, you'll notice a couple of changes, but nothing drastic, not anytime soon anyway. Winds are going to be out of the east on Thursday afternoon. You'll notice a front just above the banner there across Missouri and Kansas. That's going to be heading our way very soon. No real big weather. A few rain showers across West Texas and towards Brownsville. Highs Thursday afternoon, 87 in North Texas. Will be about 90 degrees San Antonio, 89 in both El Paso and Brownsville. By Friday, here comes this next front, bringing some rain, very scattered rainfall across the Panhandle. Not much rain expected there. Winds will be out of the southwest across western sections of the state and out of the east and northeast across north and central. By Friday morning, 65 in North Texas, 66 San Antonio, 67 in Houston. By Friday afternoon in Houston, we'll be climbing into the low 90s, while most of us in Texas will only make it in the mid to upper 80s. On Saturday, our next chance of rain for Amarillo and up towards Dalhart. The rest of us will be dry as this next cold front moves on through. Behind it, winds shifting due north. It will be out of the west across the rest of the state as it gradually moves on towards Dallas and San Antonio. Lows Saturday morning, 68 in Dallas, 68 San Antonio, only 62 expected. Midland will be 65 and El Paso 58 in Amarillo, 82 degrees in the Panhandle Saturday afternoon, 88 Dallas, 91 San Antonio. And for all of your current conditions and forecasts, you can check us out on the web at TXCN.com. More weather coming your way in about 10 minutes on Texas Cable News, TXCN.
You're watching Texas Cable News, covering the state of Texas 24/7. And we're back in just a moment.
The 5-day forecast, part of Texas weather every 10 minutes on TXCN.
For 43 years, the Childress family has been serving the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, specializing in custom building furniture and offering fine fabrics. If you would like to build something new or update an old favorite, Childress offers the resources, craftsmanship, and customer service you need. Whether you're looking for a wide selection of fabrics or a new piece to update a room, Childress offers the experience of experts. Come visit our new store in Frisco or stop by our original location just minutes from downtown Dallas.
And so it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the entire community to welcome you to Maine.
Well, hi, Deb. You finally done it. Joined the ranks of the self-employed.
Thanks. It hasn't been the easiest couple of months. Cliff, you've been self-employed for years. How did you get started? Who did you go to when you had a question?
Whoa, stop right there. I'll give you the one contact that really helped me get my feet on the ground. The National Association for the Self-Employed. They were able to answer my questions. They gave me some sound advice, plus they gave me great business, personal, and health benefits.
I was wondering what I was going to do for all those benefits. What's their number?
The National Association for the Self-Employed gives me great business, personal, and health benefits.
I cannot live another day without air conditioning.
Says tomorrow's gonna be hotter.
Yesterday you said you'd call Sears.
I'll call today.
You call now.
I'll call now.
Right now, take advantage of special savings and get 0% financing for 1 full year on Trane and Kenmore high-efficiency air conditioning systems. For a free in-home estimate, call Sears today. Sears Home Central, the good life at a great price, guaranteed.
So what's the paper say about tomorrow?
Another scorcher.
Cool.
In our focus this half hour, a Houston woman who's become an amateur genealogist. Using the internet, she reunites descendants with old pictures she finds in antique stores. And as KOGU TV's Jason Whiteley reports, what started as a hobby is rapidly becoming a business.
Ashley Britton has developed a certain addiction to antique stores.
Oh, yes. I'd be dangerous if I worked in them. I would never make any money, and I'd go home with all kinds of antiques.
Her passion is for pictures. Once a week for 6 hours a day, she shops for old photos.
I see, here's a great photo, this Shug Studio, and this is a Houston, Texas picture. They were on Main Street, and it's of a little baby.
Britton says she tries to reunite these lost prints with the people pictured or their descendants.
I have some items right now that are going back to Germany and Ireland.
The ones with the names or addresses scribbled on them are often the best buys.
It's wonderful to be able to give back to somebody their roots. These things are just sitting in antique stores collecting dust.
Ashley Britton says she spends about $50 a week on old photos at antique stores. This amateur genealogist is also a professional website designer, and she uses the internet to reconnect the photos from the past with the rightful owners today. Here is where Ashley spends most of her time, behind a computer, scanning pictures and searching for their owners.
This is one that's going to Ireland.
Ashley says she charges people only what she pays. And in the last 4 years, she says she has reunited more than 270 photos. With thousands of pictures from the past still lost in the present, Ashley says she hopes to turn her rewarding hobby into a profitable business. Jason Whiteley, 11 News.
More Texas headlines coming up in our next half an hour. But first, they promise to boost energy, prevent memory loss, and even build muscle. Coming up next, dietary supplements and how both doctors and Capitol Hill are searching for what works and what doesn't. So we'll have more on that coming up. But first, time to update the forecast for your part of Texas.
Traveling today, let's check it out for you nationwide. A front moving through the Rockies, ridge of high pressure out east, and that's helping to dry us out here in Texas. Your forecast for this afternoon, we might get a little bit more rain in southern parts of the state. Some scattered showers across Florida with an area of low pressure, weak area of low pressure just offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. By Wednesday morning, looking at a little bit of rain falling across the Rockies. Temperatures today, look at that, just a small patch of 90s now since we are into mid-September almost. 80s from Texas through the plains, we're looking at 60s and even a few 50s up in extreme northern parts of North Dakota and Minnesota. How about that air quality forecast now? Let's check it out for you. Dallas is level orange, Beaumont level green, so is San Antonio, El Paso, and Houston level yellow. That means your air quality is moderate, but Dallas being level orange, that means sensitive groups need to limit that outdoor activity. In level green, that's good air quality. Let's check your statewide forecast now if you are going to be traveling here in Texas.
Good morning. We are interrupting our regular programming to take you live now to the World Trade Center in New York City. As you can see, smoke emanating from that building there. We have received reports that some type of a plane crashed into the World Trade Center tower there. No word on what type of a plane. Witnesses say it may have been a twin-engine plane or possibly could have been a 737 again. Details are just trickling in. We are waiting for more information. That plane, though, as we have heard, is still embedded in part of the building. As you can see, the smoking there. Ambulances have not yet responded, as this just happened a short time ago. Again, we're trying to get some details together to bring you more information on this, and we'll have the very latest for you as it becomes available to us. As you can see right there again, a live look here in New York City at the World Trade Center building. You can see the smoke coming from that tower there. If you're just joining us, we have heard reports that some type of a plane crashed right into that building. In fact, it may still be embedded in that building. No reports yet, no confirmation at least on what type of plane that was, but witnesses say that it may have been a twin-engine plane or possibly even a 737 commercial jet. Again, we are still waiting for details to come in on this. Right now, we have gotten a lot of our reports from witnesses, so again, we are still waiting for a lot of confirmation on this. Again, a live picture here at the World Trade Center in New York City. A plane apparently crashed into the tower there, and again, we're still waiting on more information. We'll bring you the very latest as it becomes available to us. Right now, let's go ahead and go to a commercial break again. We will bring you the very latest as we learn it.
I came in contact with Bankers Financial because my parents and my brother had both done mortgages with them. We knew we were going to be needing to do some remodeling, and I feel like they have a product in the Purchase Plus that is difficult to find.
I mean, we were able to do what we wanted and make it a beautiful home.
If I were to have to do it all over again, I would definitely use Bankers Financial.
Apply online through our link at TXCN.com or call us today for the latest loan rates and programs.
It's back. TXCN and Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket let you make the call on the Dallas Cowboys postgame show.
I get it big time.
This season, after every Cowboys game, turn to TXCN and join Rich Phillips, Bob Sturm, Dale Hansen, and whoever else we can get to show up, throw down, and take your call. Put down the remote and pick up the phone. The Dallas Cowboys postgame show on TXCN and The Ticket.
Brought to you by the Huffines Auto Group.
With no goalies, these shots are easy, but for a lot of kids, reaching their goal is a little tougher. We created the Mike Madonna Foundation to provide help because I believe every kid deserves a shot. Visit MikeMadonna.com to join our team, and you can help give kids a shot.
PET scan technology may help predict who will get Alzheimer's disease. Researchers say the technology helps identify new markers in the brain, and the new study is being published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. A hearing on Capitol Hill recently focused on supplements sold as anti-aging products. Testimony also centered on an advertising magazine through which many of the supplements are marketed, the Journal of Longevity. A Louisiana senator said just about everything advertised in the magazine appeared to be too good to be true. The American Cancer Society is hopping onto the saddle to launch its Cancer Crusade. Organizers hope that within 1 year, thousands of rodeos and livestock will be part of the Cowboy Cancer Crusade. Now, the effort will focus on skin and tobacco-related cancers, which are the most preventable and most prevalent within cowboy-related groups. It's not just anti-aging products that are becoming more popular now. Some American doctors are taking their cure from Eastern practitioners. And now researchers are looking into herbal medicines to ease the side effects of chemotherapy. WFAA TV's Gannett St. James has more.
Chinese herbs. Some swear by them, others scoff. Now some doctors in San Francisco are trying to find out once and for all if they really work.
All our patients ask us about this, and we really don't have good information that we can give them.
Dr. Dabu Tripathi is studying 60 women with early-stage breast cancer to see if herbal therapy can reduce the unpleasant side effects of chemotherapy.
We have a lot of effective drugs for things like nausea and fatigue, but they don't work for everybody. And most patients that go through chemotherapy do at some point experience side effects that are not controlled by standard medications.
Half the patients get a mixture of 21 Chinese herbs. The other half gets a placebo.
Hi, how are you? I hope I'm doing real good.
When breast cancer patient Terry Markovitz learned she'd been given the herbs and not the placebo, she wasn't surprised.
There was a woman who had chemotherapy at the same time I did, who was not on the study. And by the time we got to our cars together afterwards, she was vomiting, and I went shopping.
Doctors warned they won't be sure herb therapy works until the study is finished, but Terry Markovitz can be counted among the believers. Janet St. James, Channel 8 News.
You're watching Texas Cable News, covering the state of Texas 24/7, and we're back in just a moment. Central Time. You're looking at a live picture here of the World Trade Center in New York City in the financial district in Lower Manhattan. We have received reports that some type of a plane crashed into that building. No word yet on what type of a plane. We've been hearing from witnesses that it might have been a twin-engine plane or even possibly a 737 commercial jet. As you can see, the smoke billowing out of that building. Witnesses say they heard a huge explosion. That plane, in fact, may still be embedded in that building. Still no word on whether people are inside that building. It, of course, is 9 o'clock in New York right now, so we're still waiting to hear if people are trapped inside. We're also waiting to hear from the FAA about records of planes in the area or some type of possible flight plan. As the details are still trickling in, we still don't know all the details, of course, but again, a live picture here of the World Trade Center in New York City in the financial district in Lower Manhattan. We're going to go ahead and listen in now to ABC. Take a listen.
20 minutes or 8:45. This is a time when literally tens of thousands of people are coming to work at the World Trade Center.
Looking at the top of the building, you mentioned there's an observation center, and I don't know what time it opens, but I think it opens fairly early, and people are up there at all hours of the day. Families, tourists coming in to look at the city of New York from atop it. Also there, I don't know if this is the building that has the restaurant on top of it as well, but in those high floors there are places where tourists team in the morning, even if the regular workers weren't in. And we remind you again that there was a terrorist bomb that did go off at the World Trade Center years ago. It was down in the garage level, but we have
Obviously,
reason,
no indication that this could have been related to that. Right.
We're told that CNN does have a witness on the line right now. Let's go ahead and listen in to CNN.
It inverted. With the impact, everything went inside the building.
Inside.
The only thing that came out was a little bit of the outside awning. But I'd say the hole is, let me just get a better look right now.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd say the hole takes about, looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Hold on just a moment. We've got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll tell you what's going on.
Okay, just put Winston on pause there for just a moment.
Okay, the whole building just exploded some more. The whole top part.
Okay.
The building's still intact. People are running up the streets. Am I still connected?
Winston, this would support probably what Libby and you both said, that perhaps the fuselage was in the building that would cause a second explosion such as that.
Well, that's what just happened then.
That certainly.
Yeah, people are running up.
We're getting word that perhaps.
Okay, hold on. The people here are, everybody's panicking.
All right, Winston, Winston, let me put Winston on hold for just a moment.
Okay, I don't know how much longer we're staying. I'm inside of a diner right now.
Well, Winston, you know what? If you could give us a call back, I just don't want to panic here on the air. Let's just take some of our pictures from News Chopper 7. Now, one of our producers said perhaps a second plane was involved, and let's not even speculate to that point, but at least put it out there that perhaps that may have happened. The second explosion would certainly back the theory from a couple of eyewitnesses that the plane fuselage perhaps stayed in those upper buildings. Now, if you look at the second building, there are two, that both twin towers now are on fire. Now, this was not the case, am I correct? A couple of moments ago. This is the second twin tower now on fire, and we're going to check on the second flight if perhaps that had happened. This all began at about 8:48 this morning. Again, what we know, in case you're just joining us, a small plane, not a Cessna type or 5 or 6 seater, but instead perhaps a passenger flight, ran into the north side of the World Trade Center. As you can see, the second explosion that you're looking at now in the second Twin Tower, it has spread much debris, much more debris than the first explosion or the first accident. Is Winston still on the line with us? Okay, he's not there, but do we have, I'll just talk to my producer, do we have an eyewitness that perhaps sees better than we do from these pictures? Again, you can see that there is debris falling off.
Come on, dip.
Okay, we actually have an Eyewitness News reporter, Dr. Jay Adlersberg, who was downtown at the time, and he is on the phone with us live. Dr. Jay, what can you tell us?
Hello, Steve. I'm actually uptown at 86th and Riverside. I can see the World Trade Center from about half the building up to the top. And about 5 minutes ago, as I was watching the smoke, a small plane, it looked like a propeller plane, came in from the west, and about 20 or 25 stories below the top of the center, it disappeared for a second and then exploded behind a water tower, so I couldn't tell whether it hit the building or not, but it was very visible that a plane had come in at a low altitude and appeared to crash into the World Trade Center.
Dr. Jay, we're going to take a look at videotape just moments ago of the second plane hitting the World Trade Center. That is spectacular pictures. I don't know if you could see the plane, and that too was a passenger plane, if perhaps some type of navigating system or some type of electronics would have put two planes into the World Trade Center within, it looks like, about 18 minutes of each other. You want to go to? We have another copy. There is the second plane, another passenger plane hitting the World Trade Center. These pictures are frightening indeed. These are just minutes between each other. So naturally, you will guess and you will speculate and perhaps ask the question, if some type of navigating equipment is awry, that two commuter planes would run into the World Trade Centers at the same time. Our director, you're speaking in my ear at this point. You are looking at live pictures right now of the World Trade Centers. Again, we now have two passenger planes within 18 minutes of each other smashing into the World Trade Centers. Dr. Jay, are you still with us on the phone?
I'm still with you, Steve.
Dr. Jay, this is just frightening pictures indeed, and I would assume, or you would naturally think, that when
You've been listening to some of the coverage provided for us by our affiliate WABC out of New York City. Let's go now and check our other affiliate WNBC to get the latest. I'm sorry, WNYW. WNYW here, live coverage here of this amazing picture we're getting from Lower Manhattan. Two planes, one hitting each of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center.
They come by and they say, what happened, what happened? And you just got to say something hit the building and then something hit both buildings.
Well, we saw clearly, we didn't see the first one, but we saw clearly that a plane deliberately crashed into one of the upper floors of the World Trade Center. That was the second plane. So two planes crashed into the upper floors of each of the World Trade Center towers. And I understand now that Port Authority headquarters are in one of those buildings somewhere near that location.
Jim, I don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they thought they saw a missile. I don't know how people could differentiate, but we might keep open the possibility that this was a missile attack on these buildings.
Ali, I must say that we have an eyewitness who said it was a large plane that crashed first. And then as we were watching the live picture here in the studio, we saw a plane crash into the other tower of the World Trade Center. And again, let's just to be sure, there it is. There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
That is a very hard thing to watch.
And clearly, these are incredible pictures that we're watching this morning. These, thanks to our affiliate WNYW in New York. You are looking at this picture. It is the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, both of them being damaged by impacts from planes. We saw one happen at about maybe 9 minutes before the top of the hour, and just moments ago, so maybe 18 minutes after the first impact, the second tower was impacted by another, what appeared to be another passenger plane. In fact, we've got some tape replay of that. Do we have the tape available right now? Here's the plate. Here is the tape. You see the plane coming in from what looks like the east side, and it blows into the building with the flames and the smoke billowing out the other side of the tower. It's hard for me to tell exactly which is the north side and which is the south side, but it appears it's coming out of the north side there. Incredible pictures. These happened just moments ago. And I believe we have someone with us on the line, Ira Firmer. We have Ira Firmer, the former NTSB spokesman, and you're watching these pictures as well with us, are you not?
Yeah, I'm with you on CNN.
What can you make of what we have seen, and particularly with this replay we just saw moments ago?
That's absolutely inexplicable. There shouldn't be any aircraft in that area, much less something heading what looked like deliberately for the World Trade Center tower.
You don't think there's any way this could be any kind of an accident, no kind of a navigational equipment failure or some sort of a navigational quirk by beacons or whatever?
No, you've got incredibly good visibility at this point, and no pilot is going to be relying on navigational equipment in such a circumstance that would cause them to crash into the World Trade Center.
How far out of the way from an approach to either LaGuardia or Kennedy would a plane have to be to hit the World Trade Center?
There are approaches that come up along the Hudson River, which is to the west of the World Trade Center, and those aircraft usually wind up going into LaGuardia. So you can come within a mile or two of the World Trade Center, but it is such a visible object as you're approaching New York City that it's just not possible for a pilot during the daytime to have taken a course that would put it right into the World Trade Center. A second occurrence within a few minutes is beyond belief.
And as you can see, there definitely is no weather problem, so weather would be definitely ruled out as a factor in this case.
Yes, the course is a normal course. I mean, for commercial pilots coming into New York, it certainly appeared from the video on CNN that the second aircraft was heading for the tower, and that it was a commercial-sized aircraft.
Could you have a better idea about what size that plane was? It was kind of hard for me to tell. You're an expert in these matters. Could you look at that tape and tell what size that plane was?
It would have to be slowed down, and you'd need more than one angle for it because you'd want to see how many engines on it, the shape of the tail.
Well, if it's possible, gang, could we go ahead and replay that tape right now? Do we have the tape ready of the second plane impacting? We're going to put that tape on in just a second. Here, we're about to roll it now. If you can, sir, I don't want you to speculate, but if you can, give us an idea of what you think might be at play here. What kind of plane we're talking about, or at least what size. If we're talking about one that would hold, say, 100 people, one that would hold 300 people. From what you see, we'll have to back the tape up further than that, guys. Here we go.
It's very hard to get a perspective on it. I don't know how far away we are at this, but that looks to me like it could be certainly a passenger jet and one of those aircraft that could hold 100 or more people. I caution you at this point to wonder whether or not that airplane was occupied by more than just a pilot or crew. We don't necessarily know that there were any passengers aboard that airplane.
Understood.
Darren Kagan joining the conversation here, sir, but there's no indication that there would be any air traffic on purpose in the area of the World Trade Center at this time of day, or any time of day for that matter.
Well, not directly into the World Trade Center.
No, but even close to it.
You would be clearing the World Trade Center by a few miles. Normal operations. And when you're looking at the pictures that you see with all this smoke and fire and all that, it's just absolutely unbelievable to think that a flight crew that wouldn't ordinarily see the World Trade Center, wouldn't ordinarily be on course, would now not see this as a flaming beacon to avoid.
Let me ask you this about the airspace. Given that it appears that two different airplanes have flown into the World Trade Center in 18 minutes, is it possible to shut down that airspace and keep another plane from doing something just like it?
I don't think that this represents an accident, and so I don't think that we're talking about having to now keep other aircraft away. This picture that CNN is broadcasting live is probably from a range of a couple of miles away, and you can see that.
No, certainly that, but if there was somebody who intentionally was trying to do the same thing again, is there a way to shut down the airspace to keep planes out?
No, you can't shut down airspace. There's no gate, there's no fence in airspace. All you can do is broadcast that that airspace is closed, but if someone is intent on breaking through it, that happens with our military airspace all the time off the coast.
I want to bring up a couple of points right now, if I may. We've just been told that President Bush has been informed of this incredible tragedy happening in New York. He did have an event scheduled at 9:30 this morning, which we were going to cover here. He has just canceled that event. We expect he will probably have some comments fairly soon, and we will bring those to you live the moment that we understand he is available. But I'd like to ask you once again, Ira, if I can get back to asking you about this particular crash. Is it possible that those who are tracking planes, either at LaGuardia through the radar, can I give us some more information about exactly what happened here? Were these planes, I guess, using beacons to come in, or if there's some sort of identification of these planes as they approach the New York area?
Yes, there should be if they were under air traffic control. You've got one eyewitness telling you that the first aircraft flew from Westchester and flew down through Manhattan and directly into the World Trade Center, presumably the North Tower. And now you've got, you're showing the other aircraft coming in, looks to me like it would be from the west, into the other tower. Those planes could be, should be, normally would be under air traffic control, but it is also entirely possible for aircraft to fly into, through, or over New York, or in this case into a building in New York, without being under the control. And we use that word advisedly. All that means is information is what air traffic control is, and just operate and do whatever they want if they don't follow the rules of air traffic control.
Ira, affirmatively, thank you very, very much for your insight, and the longer we talk, the less convinced many will become that this was an accident. We thank you very much for your insight.
More information on that just ahead. Now we want to bring in Todd Harris. Todd, on the scene, saw what happened. Todd, are you with us?
Yes, I had a perfect view, and the plane was coming in. I noticed it a second before it hit the building. It looked like it was moving slowly, and it lined itself up to hit the building directly.
Are you talking about the first plane or the second plane?
The first plane.
And Todd, tell us exactly where you are, where you had this great view.
I was on Highway 278, like a dead-on view of the side that it hit the building.
All right, Todd, hang on. We're going to continue our conversation. Leon has something to jump in here with.
Yes, I'm checking the wires even as we speak. The Associated Press is reporting right now that the FBI in Washington is investigating reports that these two plane crashes are the result of foul play. There is a report here by the Associated Press of a possible plane hijacking. They don't say two, but they say a possible plane hijacking. Let's go to Kelly Arena, who's on the phone right now from Washington. Kelly? Hello, Kelly. Kelly Arena, are you there? All right, Kelly Arena's.
Okay,
there's Kelly. Kelly, what have you learned?
Okay, well, an FBI official has just told CNN that they are investigating, but they have not yet determined whether or not this was indeed a terrorist act. The official that I spoke to said that so far there has been no communication, no one claiming responsibility for either of those crashes. There is an investigation underway. If there is anything to be said officially, it will come out of the New York City field office of the FBI, which is right now involved in that investigation to find out whether or not it was. But I have to tell you, I repeat, right now the FBI has not determined whether or not this is a terrorist act, although they are investigating.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly Arena. We appreciate that. Darren,
let's go ahead and bring back in Todd Harris. Todd, are you still with us? We don't have Todd. Okay, once again, if you're just joining us, the breaking story that we're following out of New York City, within the span of 18 minutes, two separate planes crashing into the World Trade Center. The rescue operations underway, not clear. We're going to show you, this is the second plane after the first tower was already on fire. This happened just minutes ago. We'll let the pictures tell the story. You saw it live here on CNN as it happened. The plane crashed right into the side of the World Trade Center, causing a huge explosion. Now, as we speak, and we're showing you live pictures now, smoke and fire taking place in both towers of the World Trade Center.
And it appeared that second plane that we actually did have on videotape, on its approach toward that tower, actually turned. And I have to think, I'm not an expert in these things, so I don't know, but it would seem as though that move actually may have caused much more damage. These are incredible pictures, as you can see here.
Let's keep the pictures up as we go ahead and talk to more eyewitnesses. Joe Trachtenberg joining us on the phone. Joe, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what your vantage point is and what you've seen so far?
Well, we got. I heard on the radio that one of the towers was on fire, and we went to a high point in our building, which is on the 25th floor, and you had a clear view of the both World Trade Centers, and the one tower was smoking hard. And there was another plane that was flying low, and we just looked at it, and before you know it, just kamikaze, boom, right into the other tower, and mass explosion, windows flying. It was horrible. I'm still distraught looking at it.
Were you close enough to see or get a general idea of what kind of plane that was that flew in the second time?
Well, I'm not an expert on planes, but it wasn't didn't seem like a big passenger jet. It was a smaller type plane because it made some pretty radical turn, and you know, they were flying low, and you're not used to see big planes flying over Manhattan because I don't think you're allowed to, but it was pretty tough.
And explain to me again what your vantage point is, where you are in the city looking at this.
We're in Chelsea. It's like 25th Street and 7th Avenue, and it's clear looking all the way downtown, and you could see the buildings, you know, the whole downtown, because it's a clear day, and it's a disaster.
And once again, describe for us what you saw as that plane went to the second building.
That plane just flew straight into the second building on the downtown side, it appeared. It was just a huge explosion, and smoke just immediately, and fire started immediately coming from the second tower as it hit, and there was glass flying everywhere.
All right, looks like we have a little bit of audio problem with that, so I'm going to say thanks to Joe Trachtenberg for talking to us and telling us what he saw. We were watching it right here, live on CNN, as that plane went in. He had a closer vantage point and could see, as you heard Leon, he was saying he doesn't think it was a big jet, but a smaller plane, closer up from where he could see it.
Well, we do have a tape of a recounting by another witness, another eyewitness. We're going to go to some tape that we're getting for our affiliate WABC in New York, where they interviewed an eyewitness who saw the second crash as it happened.
I'd say the whole takes about, let's say 6, 7 floors were taken out, and there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Hold on just a moment. We've got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll tell you what's going on.
Okay, just put Winston on pause there for just a moment.
Okay, the whole building just exploded some more. The whole top part.
Okay.
The building's still intact. People are running up the streets. Am I still connected?
Winston, this would support probably what Libby and you both said, that perhaps the fuselage was in the building that would cause a second explosion such as that.
Well, that's what just happened then.
That certainly.
Yeah, people are running up.
We're getting word that perhaps.
Okay, hold on. The people here everybody's panicking.
Keep in mind that the first plane hit about 8:48 a.m., so there had to already be a number of people at work inside the World Trade Center. We're going to go right now bring in Rose Arce, one of our producers here at CNN. She's with us on the phone and has with her a number of people who have escaped the building. Rose.
Yes, there's a huge crowd. I'd say about hundreds of people on the streets that come from south to north. I've really thousands of people that have been running from inside these buildings. You know, it's a very heavily trafficked area in downtown, the World Trade Center. Many of them were inside the building when they felt the explosion. And they say there was just pandemonium. There was no warning, no alarms, no anything. Everyone just raced from their desks, ran downstairs, and now there's a steady stream of folks running away from the building. Some people saying that they're fearing there'll be another explosion, and when they saw the second plane, convinced that this was dangerous, there's just an absolute flood of folks escaping downtown Manhattan right now.
And Rose, do you have anybody with you that could talk about being inside the World Trade Center when this happened?
Right now, honestly, there are scores of people that are literally running by me. There's debris on the base of the building that has continued to fall, as you know, even as far as a block away from the building. And what's happened is that everyone seems to have figured out that there's ongoing danger, and there's just a stream of folks running as quickly as they can uptown away from this.
Understandably, what about rescue efforts? I would imagine there's still a number of people inside those buildings.
Well, right now what you see is there's trucks trying to get through, and people have that actually jumped from the crowd and are trying to help direct traffic to try to get emergency vehicles there. There's no traffic going in the other direction, but because of the flow of people, it looks like some emergency vehicles are actually having trouble getting to the scene.
And from where you're standing, is there any kind of command center, any place that people are being directed toward?
Right now, what there is there's a crush of emergency vehicles and rescue vehicles, but they don't seem to be quite organized in any direction. There's fire department vehicles on the one side where you see the smoke coming out of the building. On the other hand, you see groups of police officers trying to organize the crowd in a more orderly fashion. I think there seems to be some fear on their part that such a huge crowd of people might injure each other on the way out.
All right, Rose Arce on the ground there near the World Trade Center. We continue our coverage live with the live pictures as we go.
And we're just now getting word again from the Associated Press now saying that the crash of these two aircraft into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York appear to be an act of terrorism. This, they are quoting a U.S. official. They did not say which department of this U.S. official was speaking from, or the authority this official was actually carrying at this particular point, but they're saying that a U.S. official is now saying to the Associated Press, it is official, well, he is saying at least, that these two aircraft crashes we've seen into each of the towers of the World Trade Center are the act of terrorism. We're just getting word now that President Bush is going to be coming out, and he's going to have comments momentarily. We understand, we're keeping an eye on the picture from Sarasota. He's going to be returning to Washington almost immediately, we understand. Darren?
And in fact, as you mentioned, President Bush is in Florida today. We're supposed to have an education event just minutes from now. That has been canceled. Our Major Garrett is traveling with the president. Major, maybe you can tell us a little bit more on the president's immediate plans.
Good morning, Darren. President Bush, as you said, will make a statement here at Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota on the catastrophe at the Twin Towers in New York. Following that statement, the president will board Air Force One and return immediately to Washington. We are told by White House officials traveling with the president in Sarasota that he was notified either shortly before 9 a.m. or just shortly after. We don't have an exact moment of the notification of the president. We believe his chief of staff, Andrew Card, told him of the events in New York City. The president has been monitoring them as best as he can. He was, at one moment this morning, sitting reading a book to some of the elementary school children here as scheduled. Reporters asked him if he was aware of the situation in New York. He nodded a bit gravely and said he would have something to say about that shortly. We are expecting that statement any moment now. I can tell you here in Sarasota, with those traveling with the president, they are trying to sift through all of the amazing and terrifying both pictures and details as they can get them from New York City, but no confirmation here from White House officials about what this in fact is, whether it's accident or terrorism. They are trying to gather information as best they can, give it to the president, and trying to keep things on a very calm and even keel if possible.
And on that note, Major, it sounds like that exchange of questions with the president came at what would be a sensitive time if he was sitting in front of a bunch of school children and not wanting to scare the children.
Well, precisely. And the president has a way of letting reporters know that it's either an appropriate time or an inappropriate time to take questions. He does that in many different environments, many different situations. Clearly this morning with a crowd of children, he wanted to keep an even keel, keep the situation under control as best as possible. He just nodded and said, we'll talk about this later.
So once again, we do expect to hear from the president soon. A time frame on that?
Within the next 10 minutes or so. Again, things are very much in flux. Things are a bit confused. The event here, which was scheduled to talk about education reform, talk about the importance of reading, that has been scrubbed, and the president is trying to gather whatever information, all the information he can from various White House sources, make a statement, and then get aboard Air Force One, get back to Washington just as soon as he can.
Major Garrett traveling with the president in Sarasota, Florida. Major, thank you very much. And of course, as soon as the president begins to speak, you'll see those comments live here on CNN. Leon.
I want to just inform you that we've just gotten word, according to Reuters news service, trading on the markets in New York have been postponed indefinitely. And we will try to keep an eye on that, but can't expect that to happen, get underway anytime soon. But we just heard our Major Garrett mention moments ago this investigation. We're just now getting reports here, the Associated Press, saying that U.S. officials are saying this is an act of terrorism. Let's go now to our David Enzor, who's on the phone right now, and give us some more information on what may be at stake there. David.
Well, Leon, I can just tell you that U.S. officials are also telling me that this is clearly not an accident in their view, and they do believe that terrorism is at the root of this. They believe this is a terrorist act. However, they have very little other information. Obviously, law enforcement agencies will be taking the lead on this, trying to find out who was flying the planes, whether they had in fact been turned away from on. So very little information.
David, we're going to cut you off. President Bush is speaking.
For America, I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
U.S. soil. They're mentioning the 2 planes that have crashed into the World Trade Center this morning. It says a full-scale investigation is underway to hunt down those responsible for this, saying terrorism will not stand.
And Leon, on the heels of the president's remarks, CNN has learned that at least one of the planes involved in this hit on the World Trade Center was an American Airlines 767, a Boeing aircraft that took off from Boston. What happened to that airplane as it took off from Boston and how it ended up at the World Trade Center, our details will have to fill in as we go. But let's go ahead and bring in our David Ensor. David, you were saying before we interrupted you for the president's remarks.
Well, unfortunately, the amount of detail that the officials who are tracking this have is pretty sketchy at this point. But I was just saying that officials are calling this an act of terrorism. They're saying that's clearly what it is, clearly not an accident. And law enforcement agencies, the FBI and others, will be taking the lead on this, officials say. And clearly, obviously, they will first try to ascertain who did this. What nationality are they? What's behind this? That's really all I can say. There are several places around the government. There are groups of officials gathering and setting up crisis centers to try and deal with the flow of information on this, which, as you can imagine, is going to be considerable as the day progresses.
And so far, as far as we know, no one has been taking responsibility for this.
There have been no claims of responsibility, and U.S. intelligence officials say they had no warning of anything like this coming along.
All right, David Ensor, thank you for joining us on the phone. Once again, you can see that information at the bottom of your screen. 2 different planes have flown into the World Trade Center within the last hour. One plane was an American Airlines Boeing 767 from Boston. In terms of how many people were on board that plane and if it was forcibly taken from Boston into New York, we still have yet to learn.
We're joined now on the telephone by the former Federal Emergency Management Agency Director James Lee Witt. Director Witt, you're watching these pictures with us this morning. Your comments?
Well, it's just horrible. There's no doubt. I did see the one plane flying into the building. It's just unbelievable, something like this. But, you know, we've been... for several years now, we've been working on terrorist-type events, and this is apparently one of those events. Do not know yet, but apparently it could be. And right now, I know I really feel for those families, but Richie and the New York Emergency Management, the state of New York, and I know they're very busy right now in the FBI and law enforcement. But this is one of those crisis management as well as a consequence management situation that they're going to have to be dealing with.
You know, the first thing this calls to mind to many of us who have been here to cover these events was the World Trade Center bombing back in was it '96 when that bombing occurred?
Yes.
And you were director of FEMA at that particular time. Since then, has there been a plan put in place for something like this, to recover from this, or to actually to go through the exercises necessary to get people out and to recover from it?
Well, they have a very good plan in place, and for even events, not as this. I don't think I don't know if they put a plan in place for airline crashing into it, but I know they take every scenario they could think of and try to deal with a plan that will help them respond in the most effective way. And we even practice airplanes flying into igloos, and at some of the arsenals around the United States. So you try to practice for everything you can think of and hope for the best, and that you can be able to respond and hope none of this happens. But
on that note, then, did you run any kinds of tests at all, or any kinds of, I don't know, theoretical tests or computer tests or anything on something like this?
We didn't. I'm not sure if New York City did. I'm sure they did. But you can't. How can you stop something like this without having an anti-aircraft gun sitting on top of buildings?
Yeah.
You just can't. You can prepare the best you can be, and that's all you can do. But I'm sure that they've got everything in place and doing. They always do an excellent job up there in New York.
Director James Lee Witt, former director of FEMA, we thank you very much for your time this morning. We may be talking with you later on.
As we continue our coverage, our Aaron Brown in New York City joining us now. Aaron, we can see over your left shoulder there the building still smoldering of the World Trade Center.
Well, it is a grotesque sight to look at from about 30 blocks away from where we are. For those of you just joining us, let's just briefly recap what we know. About an hour ago, about 8:45 Eastern Time, one plane crashed into the tower, the World Trade Center tower on the right, the first of those towers that you can see behind me. And then about a half hour later, a second plane crashed into the tower number 2. That's the one to the left, where the darker smoke is billowing out right now. We have reports, CNN has been told that one of the planes was an American Airlines 767 that had been hijacked from Boston. We don't know if that was the first or the second plane that hit the tower, but we do know that it was a 767 American Airlines jet. At least that's what CNN has been told by sources so far this morning. We also have reports of 1,000 injuries. That is unconfirmed, and we always remind you in moments like these that as these initial reports come in, it is very early. I can tell you, driving in, it is extraordinarily chaotic on the west side of New York. It is the kind of situation where numbers change, where situations change, but this is the information we have now, that there are at least 1,000 injuries, and we're working on that. As you can see, the smoke billowing out of the Trade Center. In Sarasota, Florida now, Major Garrett joins us. Major, what are you being told?
Hello. President Bush has notified, talked to Vice President Cheney. He has talked to the FBI Director, Robert Mueller, and he has also spoken with the Governor of New York, Governor Pataki, about this catastrophe. The President will convene a national security meeting upon his arrival back at Washington. Those are the 4 pieces of information we have gathered here in the moment since I just spoke to you on the telephone. The President, as we just saw a few moments ago, identifying this as an apparent act of terrorism against the United States, said there will be a full investigation. The entire apparatus of the United States government, FBI, national security, CIA, the Vice President, who you may remember was placed in charge of a domestic terrorism study group within the White House to monitor and develop plans to deal with a catastrophe of just this kind. All those parts of the government have been mobilized. The President is heading back to Washington very soon. Here's what the President said about this catastrophe at the Twin Towers in New York just a few moments ago here at a Sarasota elementary school.
Major, it's Aaron.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
The president was first.
Again, 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center towers, 110 stories tall, each in New York City. The FBI says that this is certainly no accident. They believe that this is indeed a terrorist act. So far, no one has claimed responsibility, and there was absolutely no warning of this, the FBI says. Here is what we know at this time as details continue to trickle in on this Tuesday morning. One of those airplanes involved, we don't know if this was the first plane crash or the second, was an American Airlines 767 Boeing aircraft that took off or was hijacked from Boston. We do not know how many people were on board this aircraft. We're still trying to gather that kind of information. As for the second plane, we do not know what kind of plane was involved in that second crash that happened just 18 minutes after the first crash. Witnesses do say, though, that they believe it was a smaller plane. We are still awaiting word on victims and casualties and rescue efforts. CNN does report that at least 1,000 injuries have been reported. Again, this is very new information still trickling in, but the FBI does believe that this is most certainly an act of terrorism. Now, some background here on the World Trade Center in New York. The towers were struck by Muslim bombers in 1993. This did kill 6 people. Again, as for casualties and injuries in this incident, in these incidents, we always like to remind you that we are just getting this information in. Exact numbers have not come in just yet. Let's go ahead and listen in.
We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in other area of public policy. We're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country, and because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments, and we will look forward to an early
Senator Ted Kennedy in Washington. Chris Plant, a CNN producer, is at the Pentagon, where there is a significant fire. Chris, you're on the phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Tell me what you know.
Well, arriving at the Pentagon a short time ago, there was a huge plume of smoke which continues to rise from the west side of the Pentagon over in the area where there is a helicopter landing zone. It's along Route 27 if you're looking at maps of the area. The building is currently being evacuated, and police and emergency units are, of course, responding from all around the building and from the local Arlington County Fire Department. The plume of smoke is enormous. It's a couple of hundred yards across. At its base, it is billowing into the sky, hundreds of yards. It's impossible for me to say from this side of the building whether the building itself is on fire or up in flames, or exactly what caused this. I did not hear an explosion, but there is certainly a very, very significant fire in this enormous office building on the west front. The building is being evacuated. The Defense Protective Service officers, the police force for the Pentagon, are on a very tight string right now. As I arrived, I was held at gunpoint.
Chris, yes. let me interrupt you for a second. Just hang on. Don't go anywhere. We're getting reports now that the White House is being evacuated as well. We don't know precisely what has caused that decision to be made, whether that is precautionary, whether something has happened at the White House. Again, the president is in Florida this morning, so the president is not in any danger, but the White House, of course, is fully operational, whether the president is there or not, and we have reports that the White House is being evacuated. Getting back to Chris in a moment, we also have reports now from Chris Plant on the scene that the Pentagon is being evacuated as well. All of this coming on the heels of a large fire at the Pentagon, and we can't tell you at this moment whether that fire is inside the Pentagon building itself or on the ground to the Pentagon. And these 2 planes that you can see behind us that hit the World Trade Center. That's Washington, the old executive office building, I believe, and you can see the plume of smoke behind it, which we will assume until we're told otherwise that that's the fire at the Pentagon. I believe that's correct. As you look now at Washington. So we've got a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon being evacuated, the White House being evacuated, and we don't know precisely the circumstances there, what caused that decision. And we have these two enormous explosions at the World Trade Center here in New York, where two planes slammed into the buildings. We are also getting reports now that there is a fire on the Mall in Washington, that part of the Capitol that runs essentially from the Capitol to the White House in kind of a straight line going up Washington, D.C., and we have reports of a fire there. What you're looking at now is Washington, at least if I can see the monitor in front of me. It's a little tricky from where we are, but that looks to me like the old executive office building, and then in back of it you see the large plume of smoke. Here in New York, sirens everywhere, people out on the streets staring at this grotesque scene of the World Trade Center buildings. It was in February of '93, if memory serves me correctly, that there was an attack, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Bomb exploded in the garage of the Trade Center on that day in February of '93. Here we are in the year 2001, and what appears to be deliberate attacks on the World Trade Center. And then we have these two reports out of Washington, the fire at the Pentagon. Chris Plant is still on the phone, I do believe. And we'll get to him in a second. Greta Van Susteren is at National Airport in Washington. Greta, what are you hearing?
I just got off my plane. I was headed to New York. Planes were stalled. I'm at National Airport on the parking lot. I heard a huge noise. I looked over in the direction of the Pentagon. There's a huge plume of smoke coming from that area. I can't verify it's the Pentagon because there are these buildings in the way. You see particles coming down in the air, some sort of white particles. I can't tell what that is. I'd heard a noise slightly before I'd seen the smoke. I don't know if it's an airplane, if it's a bomb, but it was certainly something, and obviously there's a terrific fire going on. The skies are clear here except for the tremendous amount of smoke that's coming from there. Lots of sirens from all different directions, and of course a lot of uncertainty here at National Airport.
Greta, thank you. I want to just again recap as we pick up small pieces of information along the way. Associated Press is reporting that it was a plane that crashed at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is being evacuated. There is a large fire there, and that is the smoke you see in the shot that you're looking at now. Whether that fire is in the building itself or outside, we have not yet confirmed. There is a fire on the Mall in Washington. The cause of the fire on the Mall in Washington, we cannot yet tell you. We can tell you that the White House has been evacuated, and we can tell you that two planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. All of this began just a little more than an hour ago at about 8:45 Eastern Time. Chris Plant, tell me what you've learned since we last talked.
Well, in speaking to people here at the Pentagon as they're being evacuated from the building, I am told by several people that there was, in fact, an explosion. I was told by one witness, an Air Force enlisted, senior enlisted man, that he was outside when it occurred. He said that he saw a helicopter circle the building. He said that it appeared to be a U.S. military helicopter and that it disappeared behind the building where the helicopter landing zone is. Excuse me. And that he then saw a fireball go into the sky. I'm attempting to make my way around to that side of the building in my car right now to see if I can get a better visual perspective on the scene on that side of the building. But I can tell you that security has certainly clamped down. The U.S. Park Police, another federal law enforcement department, has arrived in force on the scene. There's a Park Police helicopter overhead. Every car that arrives at the gate where I was located was being stopped by officers at gunpoint. Everyone is being forced out of their vehicles as they arrive at the Pentagon. It's a very tense situation, obviously, but initial reports from witnesses indicate that there was, in fact, a helicopter circling the building, contrary to what the AP reported, according to the witnesses I've spoken to anyway, and that this helicopter disappeared behind the building and that there was then an explosion.
That's about all I have from here.
Okay, let's do this, Chris. Why don't you continue reporting, and we'll pass along a couple of other things that we're picking up along the way. Trading at the New York Stock Exchange. The Stock Exchange, as many of you probably know, but some of you don't, is in that part of Lower Manhattan, not quite as far down as the Trade Center, but it is in that part of Lower Manhattan, and trading has been suspended there. Bridges and tunnels coming into New York have been closed. That will create a whole different set of problems. We are also being told that the FAA has suspended takeoffs and landings, and I want to make sure I get this right, guys, that in all at all airports around the country. Air travel in this country has come to a halt this morning, as clearly people in government, police forces, fire departments are trying to figure out what exactly is going on. There are several now incidents that look, for all that we can tell, to be a major terrorist attack here in the United States. So all airports all across the country are closed. All bridges and tunnels coming into Manhattan are closed. The Pentagon has been evacuated, or is being evacuated. The White House is being evacuated. The president, who is in Sarasota today to make a speech on education, has spoken briefly to cameras and will shortly make his way back to Washington. They are checking out Air Force One now. Let's go to Atlanta. Chad Myers can talk to us a bit about the air traffic problems. Chad, are you there?
Aaron, yes. All of the airports across the country have been shut down. We started with Zone New York, which includes Islip, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, all the way down to Philadelphia, and then IAH, Houston, and then San Francisco, and then LA. They were just falling like a deck of cards, and then all of a sudden the FAA just said, we're shutting down everything. All flights have been canceled for another 7 hours, which is about 5 o'clock Eastern time, and then we'll reignite there. We'll take a look what's going on after that. The probability of extension, as they call that, is high, which means even after 5 o'clock, the airports may still be shut down. We'll keep watching it for you here from Atlanta.
Chad, and if you don't know, just say you don't know. Can you recall a situation where every airport in the country had been shut down?
Absolutely not, except in wartime, of course, Aaron, and obviously this is not that. But with all the airports, as they were going down from west to east, we could see them, and then we could eventually see from New York, and then they canceled Boston, as we got the report that the first flight, or one of the possible hijack flights, did come out of Boston, and then it just started going down from there. But never, ever before have we ever seen all of the airports shut down like this, not this quickly.
Chad, thank you. Stay on this for a while. We'll get back to you. We know that many people are just joining us. We want to get everyone on the same page before we move on. So one more time, let's go through the sequence of events. At about 8:45 Eastern Time, a plane crashed into the foremost of those towers that are the World Trade Center. That's Air Force One you see in Florida, the president on board. Obviously extraordinary security around the plane before the president got on, and the president is heading back to Washington. A short time ago, the president made a statement. He said, terrorism against our nation will not stand. The government will hunt down those responsible. Mr. Bush said today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on the country. And we also have a report now that it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and we have a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon is being evacuated as we speak now. The White House has been evacuated as well. CNN's John King joins us on the phone. John.
Aaron, I'm standing in Lafayette Park directly across from the White House, perhaps about 200 yards from the White House residence itself. The Secret Service has pushed most people all the way back to the other side of the park, trying to avoid having that done to me at the moment. Just moments ago, they started slowly evacuating the White House about 30 minutes ago, and then in the last 5 minutes, people have come running out of the White House and the old Executive Office building, which is the office building right directly across from the White House. About 10 minutes ago, there was a white jet circling overhead. Now, you generally don't see planes in the area over the White House. That is restricted airspace. No reason to believe that this jet was there for any nefarious purposes, but the Secret Service was very concerned, pointing up at the jet in the sky. It is out of sight now, best we can tell, but they've evacuated the entire White House staff and the old executive office, as well as some townhouses that are government offices. Many of our viewers might know Blair House, where other international leaders stay when they are in Washington. That block of townhouses has been evacuated as well, and they are pushing us now back toward H Street, which is the next main street to the north from Pennsylvania Avenue across from the White House.
John, hang on one second. We're also getting reports at the Capitol, the Treasury building also being evacuated. John, is this evacuation from the White House, was it orderly? Did it seem panicky? How would you characterize it?
It started off as orderly, much like we get when there are occasional bomb scares near the White House. But then, again, in the last 10 minutes or so, the people who came out, the last several hundred I saw leaving the grounds, were told and ordered by the Secret Service to run. They were running through the gates. These are, of course, professionals in business suits. I'm also told that prior to that, and we don't know the current situation, that the Vice President and other administration officials on the scene were meeting in the White House Situation Room, which is in the basement of the White House. Whether they have stayed on the complex or not is unknown to us at this moment. I spoke to an administration official shortly after the President delivered his statement, who said obviously the operating assumption here is terrorism. The initial assumption, this official said, was that this had something to do, or at least they were looking into any possible connections with Osama bin Laden. The administration recently released a warning that they thought Osama bin Laden might strike out against U.S. targets.
Just to add, John, a bit to what you've been saying, we're getting a report from Associated Press now that the White House was evacuated after the Secret Service received what AP is describing as a credible, a credible threat of a terrorist attack against the White House itself. And I expect you'll be checking that out. We'll try and confirm that, but that's what AP is reporting right now. Again, this all began about an hour and 15 minutes ago here in Lower Manhattan when the first of two planes crashed in to the first of the two towers behind me at the World Trade Center, and you can see the smoke billowing out of the front tower now. And then about a half an hour later, just as emergency crews were converging on the scene, as eyewitnesses were gathering on the street corners, a second plane drove in too, and you can see that plane coming around the building right now in this tape, and there you can see the hit as it comes through what looked to me, at least, and this is the first time I've seen that tape, come through the back side of the tower. I guess that would be the south side of the tower, and then the smoke and flame coming out the front side. Again, that was about a half hour after the first attack, which was at about 8:45. Look, you want to be careful here. We don't want to get too far ahead of this, but obviously this has all the appearances of an extraordinarily well-coordinated and devastating terrorist attack here in the United States. Certainly nothing like it since Oklahoma City, and nothing like it here in New York since the terrorist attack on the same World Trade Center buildings in February of 1993. At the Pentagon, a plane or a helicopter has crashed, apparently as part of whatever this operation has been, and Jamie McIntyre is there. Jamie, what are you hearing?
Well, Aaron, there is a lot of confusion here at the Pentagon. It appears that something hit the Pentagon on the outside of the 5th corridor, on the Army corridor. Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal coming past their window. The Pentagon has been evacuated. Emergency services personnel were rushing to reports of several people trapped in the building. Most of the building's 24,000 people are outside of the building or in the center courtyard as emergency teams try to sort out what has happened here. There is, of course, thick black smoke billowing from the scene. There's a lot of confusion. The Defense Protective Service, which is the police force here in the Pentagon, has been urging people to get out of the building and move away from the scene so they can handle the emergency situation. Again, it appears that an aircraft of some sort did hit the side of the Pentagon, the west front, which faces sort of toward Arlington National Cemetery. It's a corridor where a lot of Army offices are located.
Wow.
And some people were...
Jamie, I need you to stop for a second. There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower. but there was a cascade of sparks and fire, and now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, this huge billowing smoke in the second tower. This was the second of the two towers hit. And I cannot see behind that smoke, obviously, as you can either. The first tower in front has not changed, and we see this extraordinarily and frightening scene behind us of this second tower, now just encased in smoke. What is behind it, I cannot tell you. But just look at that. That is about as frightening a scene as you will ever see. Again, this is going on now in two cities. We have a report that there's a fire at the State Department as well, and that is being evacuated. So we've got fires at the Pentagon evacuated, the State Department evacuated, the White House evacuated on the basis of what the Secret Service describes as a credible terrorist threat. We have two explosions, two planes hitting the World Trade Center here in New York. And what this second explosion was that took place about a part of the south, that would be the South Tower, has apparently collapsed. We don't know if that was from the impact of this first plane that hit it or whether something else has happened there, and we'll work on that. Our Washington Bureau Chief, Frank Cesno, is on the phone. Frank, what are you hearing?
Aaron, I just drove past the Pentagon across the 14th Street Bridge, which is now choked with traffic. We're beginning to hear emergency sirens and rescue personnel fanning out across Washington. There is a gigantic black billowing cloud of smoke that is rising over the Pentagon. You heard Jamie McIntyre a moment ago describe where that was coming from. I can also tell you that local radio, in addition to talking about evacuations, as we've heard at the Pentagon, and the White House is reporting that the Capitol building has been evacuated and the Treasury Department has been evacuated. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, is exceptionally tense and clearly taking steps as if it is virtually under siege here. We don't know specifically, as you've said, what has taken place at the Pentagon, but this is very serious, striking at the heart of the national government. And as John King was explaining, the White House
Frank, it's Aaron. I need to interrupt you for a second. Again, there has been a second explosion here in Manhattan at the Trade Center. We are getting reports that a part of the tower, the second tower, the one a bit further to the south of us, has collapsed. We are checking on that. We are also told that the Sears Tower in Chicago has been evacuated, and what I can't tell you on that is whether there was something specific that happened there, whether there was an attack on that building yet, we're checking that out, or whether there was a warning, whether there was a threat of some sort, or whether that is simply precautionary. What we can tell you is that just in the last several minutes here, 2 or 3 minutes, a second or third, I guess technically, extraordinary event has happened here in Lower Manhattan. You can see this extraordinary plume of smoke that is, or was at least, the second tower of the World Trade Center. Perhaps 3 or 4 minutes ago, you could, from where we were standing, see that second building that is just a bit to the south of the first building, but you can't see it anymore. It is covered with smoke. A large plume of smoke also coming still from the first tower, where the first plane hit at about 8:45. We can, by the way, if we can cue the tape, we can show you that second attack, or at least the second explosion in the Trade Center that occurred at about 9:15 Eastern Time. As you can imagine, there you can see to the right of your screen a plane coming in. We do have a report of a hijacked American Airlines plane. It comes into the south side, and then boom, you can see the fire coming out the front, or the north side of the building. I guess that'd be the northeast side of the building. And then just in the last several minutes, there has been a second explosion, or at least perhaps not an explosion, perhaps part of the building simply collapsed. And that's what we saw, and that's what we're looking at, as smoke now just covers Lower Manhattan, almost as far to the end of Manhattan Island as you can get, is where the trade centers are. The Sears Tower in Chicago has been evacuated, and we continue to check on the circumstances there. The Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House have been evacuated in Washington as well. The president has, we can show you now what happened just a few moments ago at the Trade Center. Watch the building to the left, to the back of those two buildings. This is just a few minutes ago. We don't know if something happened, another explosion, or if the building was so weakened it just collapsed. But we have one of our producers on the phone, and I didn't get the name, so why don't we just go ahead? You there?
Yeah, this is Rose Arcee calling from New York.
Rove, tell me what you know.
Just a few minutes ago, we saw there's a portion of the building where the first plane struck that seemed to be buckling inside itself, almost as if the top of the building was going to fall. Shortly after that, two people, it's hard to tell whether they were being pushed or they physically approached themselves the sort of river side of the building, it would be the west side of the building, and appeared to jump from the top floors, just under where you're seeing the smoke and fire.
That is extraordinary. The South Tower, the World Trade Center, has collapsed. Again, tell me, how long ago was it that you saw this?
This must have been about 5 minutes ago, and prior to that, you could see heads popping out of windows right beneath where that big gaping hole is. So there appeared to be people alive right below where the crash point was that were trying to find some way out of there. And just as the thing started to buckle, you saw them plummeting from that top floor.
Right, and perhaps this is stating the obvious. We apologize for that, but obviously people were already at work here at the Trade Center when this happened. We don't know how many people have been hurt in all of this. We have no idea at this point. As you look at an aerial shot coming from I guess that would be coming from the south of the Trade Center, or what is at least the Trade Center behind those huge plumes of smoke. All airports across the country, every airport in the United States has been shut down as the FAA and the government tries to figure out exactly what has happened, what is at risk, what is not, who is behind it. Are there more explosions, more attacks yet to come? Here in New York, the trading on the New York Stock Exchange has been suspended, at least for now. All bridges and tunnels coming into the city have been shut down as police try and clear the way. We can tell you, as we were coming in perhaps an hour ago, there was a convoy, I can't think of a better word, a convoy of fire and police trucks racing down the West Side Highway, and this is in the middle of rush hour. Obviously, every available fire unit here in Manhattan has been brought to the Trade Center. Outside the White House, John King, our senior White House correspondent. John.
Hello, Aaron. They have pushed us even further back away from the White House now, and there are more than a half dozen fire trucks, some of the Secret Service now patrolling the perimeter in Lafayette Park, which is directly across from the White House, have automatic rifles drawn to keep people away from the park, and they're policing back and forth. You can probably hear additional fire apparatus arriving on the scene. Senior White House staffers who were evacuated, all they can tell us is that they were told that there was a credible threat on the White House as well, and that they were told to evacuate the premises. What we do not know is whether or not the Vice President and the National Security Team have stayed inside the White House Situation Room. We know that they were directing and monitoring operations from there as of just about 20 minutes ago. But the White House staff, the Executive Office Building staff, and all the office buildings around, including the Treasury Department and some government and some non-government office buildings, people have been evacuated out into the street. And again, the Secret Service now putting up yellow police line tape, and some of them patrolling Lafayette Park with automatic rifles, which is a scene quite extraordinary here across from the White House.
John, tell us as best you can what the government's national security apparatus will do right now. I mean, what do you guess is happening, and where is it happening?
Well, I don't want to guess at all, but from the White House Situation Room, a president or a vice president can direct a war, can direct a full-scale world war. The White House Situation Room is where all information, it is accessible to all information from the United States military, from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, from the Federal Aviation Administration in this case. The White House Situation Room is prepared just
for situations like this, unfortunately, to be prepared in a time of crisis for the president to monitor incoming information and to direct any U.S. military or non-military emergency response. The White House Situation Room is a bomb shelter, for that matter. That part of the White House is a bomb shelter. Whether or not they have stayed in there is unclear. We know in the past that would be the routine. We just do not have a direct answer as yet, because most of the staff, if not all of the staff, has been evacuated from the premises.
So I gather you're just you're not able to get any calls into the building right now, or at least not getting them answered at this point.
Calls you get into the building are not answered at this point. And more fire apparatus showing up now as we speak. We saw most of the senior staff come out. We have not seen the national security staff that we would recognize anyway, but I should note there are other gates from the White House. We are on the north side, and this is
John, you're being drowned out by the sirens. Alan Dodds-Frank of our bureau here in New York joins us on the phone. Alan, where are you?
Hi, Aaron. Our colleague Jennifer Westhoven also just arrived. She was closer to the building. I'm just south of Canal Street, about 10 blocks north of World Trade Center. And just before 10 o'clock, parts of the building began peeling away. People started screaming. Jennifer tells me, because she was a little closer to the building, that the police began yelling, "Run, run," and thousands of people started running away from the buildings as they were falling. That was, of course, followed by a onrush of ambulances and special police vehicles. Some people have told us, although I can't confirm this, that dozens of stories of the building have fallen away, maybe down as low as the 30th floor.
Let's get in, Mike. And again, just because we lost a little bit at the beginning, where are you physically now? This is
I'm just south of the Holland Tunnel in downtown Manhattan, perhaps 10 to 15 blocks north of the World Trade Center.
Got it. And the pictures that our viewers are looking at, this was that collapse of the South Tower.
Correct.
Just a few minutes ago here in New York.
Yes, and moments after that, people began running toward us. Jennifer Westhoven, who normally is at the stock exchange, was only about 5 blocks away, and she saw the same thing.
Alan, thank you. Let me go to one of New York's deputy mayors, Randy, the former deputy mayor. What are you hearing, Randy?
I only know what I have seen on television. I've tried to talk to some friends.
Here we go. Hand me the microphone. There we go.
I only know what I've heard on television. I've tried to speak to some friends. Obviously, phone lines, communication is difficult. Nothing prepares you in life for a senseless tragedy like this one, but there is no city better prepared to deal with such emergency situations than New York City.
Tell me, based on the plan, what is happening 30 blocks away?
Sure. Mayor Giuliani established early on an Office of Emergency Management to coordinate all the government agencies involved. So you have coordinated leadership of police, fire, health, all the city agencies responding to that emergency. They've planned for this kind of event. Unfortunately, this is not a unique occurrence in the life of New York City or our country. Tragedies like this have happened.
It may not be a unique occurrence, but it is a very rare and extraordinary one.
It is extraordinary, right. And therefore, in New York City, we have coordinated response, and they're responding now and providing every help that they can under these extraordinary circumstances.
Hang on one second. We have a report now of an explosion on Capitol Hill, and we are checking that out. We have a report of a plane crashing at the Pentagon being evacuated, fire on the mall in Washington, the State Department evacuated, and we have all flights shut down across the country as officials sort out what's happening here. Randy, back to you for a second. How much of the, well, if I recall this correctly, there is what was called a bunker, the mayor's bunker for these sorts of events in the Trade Center, correct?
There is an emergency management center at the Trade Center.
Clearly the mayor is not there.
I have not spoken with the mayor, so I don't know his physical location, but I do know that coordinated emergency response started immediately. It's something that the city prepares for, and it's something that, under these tragic circumstances, the city is doing everything it can to respond.
How much of the plan changed after the World Trade Center bombing in '93?
Well, there was no coordinated city response. There was no mayor's office of emergency management. Rudy Giuliani established that. It's been one of the hallmarks of his tenure, and unfortunately, there are extraordinary circumstances like this one where that coordinated effort has to come into play and is coming into play now.
Why don't you, if you can, stay with us for a little bit.
Sure.
I suspect other questions are going to come up. I want to go through again what we know here at this point, and also point out some things that are not insignificant that we don't know. And one of the things we don't know is we do not now know how many fatalities there have been.
You were just listening to live coverage on CNN. This is Texas Cable News. We are going to do our best to try and put together the details that we know of what has certainly been a horrific sequence of destruction. Began early this morning. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City, 110 stories tall, each of them. One of the towers just minutes ago collapsing, and what President Bush said was an apparent terrorist attack. A witness saying that he saw bodies falling from the 110-story towers and people jumping out of it. What you're seeing here is some video that was taken before that second building to your left collapsed just minutes ago. CNN is reporting that a third explosion may have caused this. Again, during extreme situations like these, details are just coming in. We try and do the best we can to sort them out for you, and of course some tough video to see. We have also just received reports that there may have been an explosion on Capitol Hill. Again, we are hearing this from CNN. We are still waiting for confirmation. Just some 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago, possibly more than that, there was another report after the 2 plane crashes into the World Trade Center towers in New York City of a possible crash into the Pentagon. Now, right now, the Pentagon has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. Associated Press, just to bring into the sequence of events, is reporting that 1 plane crashed into the New York Trade Center building about 8:48 Eastern Time this morning. One of the planes was reportedly a 767 American Airlines Boeing flight, Flight 11, that originated in Boston and was en route to Los Angeles. We have no word yet as to the second kind of plane or what type that was that crashed into the second tower just 18 minutes after the first crash at the World Trade Center. Let's go ahead now and there we go. And the Pentagon, another report there from Associated Press saying that witnesses saw some type of an airliner crash into perhaps the west side of the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. President Bush in Sarasota, Florida this morning was prepared to give a speech on education reform. When he was told about this, he is en route now amid heavy security to Washington, D.C. to work with the FBI. Again, the FBI reporting this is certainly no sequence of accidents. This is a terrorist act, a very sophisticated, very well-coordinated terrorist attack. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for it. Again, during extreme situations like this, we do the best that we can to try and make our way through the details. Numbers are still coming in. We do not know at this point how many casualties there may be or how many injuries, but rescue efforts are underway. Again, the FBI believing this is a sequence of acts of terrorism. No one has claimed responsibility for it yet. Let's go ahead and tune in once again with our colleagues over at CNN for the very latest.
I did just see a spokesperson, by the way, for the Speaker of the House, Mr. Hastert, Dennis Hastert, who tells me that Mr. Hastert and other leaders have been evacuated into what he called a secure location. It's not clear where exactly they are, but they've been put somewhere secure.
And because we can't see it at this point, just give me a sense of what it looks like there. Are there many, many people on the street?
The sidewalks, people are calm. I think most people don't really know what's going on. Most people haven't been watching the news. But the sidewalks are definitely full of people where, you know, normally at this time of the morning there wouldn't be that many people out here. And as I say, I've been passed by numerous members of Congress and senators and staff, you know, who I know well, who have been coming past me asking me what's going on.
Kate, why don't you hang around here and continue to report on that. Let me just, again, for those viewers who are joining us at about 20 minutes past 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, let me just briefly recap. Attacks on 2 American cities, New York and the capital in Washington. It began at about 8:45 Eastern Time when a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. That building, that was the building hit first. And then about a half an hour later, a second plane, and I'm not sure if we have the tape available. If we do, we'll show it to you. You can see the second plane coming in from the right side of your screen, going into the tower itself. This is an extraordinary and troubling piece of tape. The Justice Department is now being evacuated. The second attack on the Trade Center occurred about a half an hour or so after the first one. We have a report, CNN has been told, that an American Airlines 767 jet was hijacked out of Boston today. We don't know which of those two planes hit the tower the second time. In the last 10 minutes or so, the South Tower, or at least a portion of the South Tower, has collapsed. CNN's David Ensor joins us from Washington. David, where in the Capitol are you now?
Well, Aaron, I'm in our bureau, but I have on the telephone with me Barbara, who is the wife of a friend of mine and who is an eyewitness to exactly what happened at the Pentagon. Barbara, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, what exactly did you see? Let's look at the Pentagon now as you describe what exactly happened at the Pentagon this morning.
As we were driving into town on 395, there was an exit. We were trying to get off the exit for the Memorial Bridge. Off to the left-hand side was a commercial plane that came in and was coming too fast and too low. And the next thing we saw was it go down below the side of the road, and we just saw the fire that came up after that.
How large was the explosion?
It was large.
Was there sound as well?
That I can't verify because the windows were up in the vehicle.
Was it clear to you what had happened?
Yes, definitely.
So you believe it was a commercial airliner that was hitting the Pentagon?
Yes, and I'm not sure exactly where the Pentagon was in relationship to where the plane went down. You know, but they are relatively close to one another. Whether it hit any part of that Pentagon, I'm not sure.
How low was the plane?
When it was coming down?
Yeah.
It was coming down on less than a 45-degree angle and coming down toward the side of the 395. And when it came down, it just missed the 395 and went down below it, and then you saw the fire come up from it.
Were you able to see what kind of plane or what airline it belonged to?
No, I did not see what kind of an airline. I just assumed because we were so close to the airport, it was coming into land.
But it seemed awfully low to you?
Yes, and fast.
How big was the fireball?
I'm spatially challenged at times, and it was pretty big.
What did you think was happening?
I know that hit the ground and exploded.
Were you frightened yourself?
Yes. Yes, everybody stopped the cars, and we all got out of it and so forth.
Right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your talking to us. Aaron, back to you.
David, thank you. CNN's David Ensor in Washington. CNN's Brian Palmer joins us on the phone from here in Manhattan. Brian, why don't you begin by telling me where you are?
We are in front of the criminal courthouse after being pushed north slightly. We watched one of the towers of the World Trade Center disappear from the skyline. It basically folded into itself in a plume of gray smoke. A crowd of thousands of people dashed up Broadway, followed by emergency services personnel. That's all we know now. We're watching the plume of smoke and debris just sort of waft across lower Manhattan, and people are lining up at this payphone behind me trying to find out whether their relatives are safe.
Let me just briefly go to Randy. Randy, just look out there and tell me what you're thinking when you see what now appears that at least part of one of the landmark buildings in this city, one of the most recognizable buildings in the country, is gone.
It's the kind of moment you hope will never come. When you have been in government, when you care as much about this city and this country as a mayor like Rudy Giuliani does, it's a moment you pray will never come, and you pray for the families of anyone affected by this tragedy. But as a city, you know, we come together and our emergency services provide every support they can in the face of such a senseless tragedy.
It is an unbelievable scene as
Incredible.
You look down. I mean, we stand here at some point every day looking out at this city this time of year. It's extraordinarily pretty, and you see those two buildings high above lower Manhattan, and you look out there today and you see this gaping hole in one of them, these plumes of smoke that continue to pour from the scene, and and you know that there's nothing behind. That second tower, or at least parts of it, are gone. We join now one of our affiliates, WNYW, and their coverage here in New York. Well, we'll try and make that connection again in two cities now, and there are a lot of pieces of information floating around. We need to try and button up some of this. We had a report earlier that we now we believe we could tell you is not correct, that there was an explosion at the Capitol. There was none, as we now believe. There was no explosion at the Capitol. Air travel routed to Canada has been international flights going into the United States or into Canada, guys. Into the United States. International flights headed for the United States are being sent to Canada now, to airports there, as all air traffic in the United States has come to a halt. The FAA has shut down every airport in the country, and to our knowledge, and this is to the best of our memory, that has never happened before. We're starting to get some pictures of the scene from the ground here in Manhattan. Again, this all started about almost an hour and a half ago, I guess, a little more than that. This is a live picture of the scene now. We have crews on the ground, and they've been trying to get tape back so we can show you the situation on the ground. As you can imagine, literally, thousands of police, fire, rescue officials have converged on the scene. There are, and we don't know how many, injured to be tended to be taken to hospitals, and we continue to check hospitals to find out how many, the extent of injuries. We do not yet know how many fatalities.
I've never heard of that outfit before either, but
there is the scene. This is tape now from WABC here in New York. Their crews shot this picture as you see fire trucks and firefighters, rescue personnel at the Trade Center about 30 blocks from where we are right now. And you can see these huge columns of smoke coming off of the front tower and then a bit from the back. As you see, again, the crews working their way towards the tower themselves. It was 1993 that I suspect many of these same firefighters converged on these very same towers after the bombing in the garage level. Help me with this, but I'm pretty sure it was in the garage when a Ryder truck came in and blew up in the garage. I'm not sure it was a Ryder truck, but a truck came in and blew up in the garage, and that was in 1993.
Center, we heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know. And I don't know, everybody just doesn't know where to go. They won't let, everything is blocked off. You can't even, they're telling us to get out, but there's nowhere to go. And then I heard that another plane hit, and if you go over by there, you can see the people jumping out the window. They're jumping out the window right now. Oh my God.
All right, ma'am, thank you.
That is one of the witnesses to these extraordinary events this morning here in New York. Again, and I know that for many of you, you've heard this a lot, but I think it's important as people join us, as they do in moments like this. They are coming in all the time, that there have been attacks in 2 American cities, New York and in Washington. The trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And there, as you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words. You can see large pieces of the building falling. You can see the smoke rising. You can see a portion of the side of the building now just being covered on the right side as I look at it, covered in smoke. This is just a horrific scene and a horrific moment. The president, who is in Florida today, is en route back to the White House. He took off a short time ago. The White House itself has been evacuated on the basis of what the Secret Service says was a credible threat on the mansion itself. We believe now that we can say that portions of both towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. Whether there were second explosions, that is to say explosions other than the planes hitting them, that caused this to happen, we cannot tell you. Rose Arce, one of our CNN producers, is on the phone. Rose, what do you got?
I'm about a block away, and there were several people that were hanging out the windows right below where the plane crashed, when suddenly you saw the top of the building start to shake, and people began leaping from the windows. In the north side of the building, you saw two people at first plummet, and then a third one, and then the entire top of the building just blew up, and splinters of debris are falling on the street. Where I'm right now, there's a thick plume of smoke, and you can see crowds of people, including emergency service workers and police officers, running from the scene, screaming. And there's a school nearby where there were kids in the schoolyard. That has been emptied out, and they're running up the street now, too. The whole sort of the neighborhood, I'd say several blocks up, is covered by this almost powdery smoke. Little tiny pieces of building you can see just floating in the wind around it. It's almost like a huge cloud had kind of enveloped that part of lower Manhattan.
It is just one of those awful moments that you need to look at for a minute or two to absorb exactly what has happened. Two of the most recognizable buildings in the city of New York have been attacked, and both of them appear to have collapsed, at least in part. The second of the two collapses taking place just a moment or so ago, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes ago. There are also apparently coordinated attacks that have taken place in Washington on the Pentagon. The State Department has been evacuated. Just a few moments ago, as we said, and perhaps 20 minutes after the first tower collapsed, we turned around and saw what looked like sparks falling, and then the top part of tower number 1 collapsing. These are shots from the ground of that scene. There have been frantic efforts to get people out of the tower. Now this is tape, and you can see now whether that was an explosion or exactly what happened that caused that second tower to collapse. We cannot tell you. CNN's Kelly Wallace is on the phone with us. Kelly, where are you? What can you tell us?
Aaron, I'm just about 4 blocks north of the location of where the World Trade Center was standing. I was actually en route to the command center, people really staring in disbelief. And then as you saw, of course, the pictures watching that tower come down, people just couldn't believe their eyes.
Okay. You're watching live coverage of the reported terrorist attacks on U.S. cities, New York City and Washington, D.C. on Texas Cable News. We are now joined by Dave Cassidy of our Belo, Washington Bureau. Dave, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am.
Dave, we heard reports, or we actually read reports from Associated Press in terms of Washington, D.C., that there was an explosion at the Pentagon and possibly that was caused by another plane crashing into the Pentagon. Can you confirm that?
I can only tell you what the FAA is saying. It is saying of some kind of aircraft crashed into the Pentagon. The pictures that you may be seeing, if you've been watching, there is smoke coming from the Pentagon building. There are conflicting reports as to whether this craft, whatever it was, hit the ground outside the Pentagon and then exploded, or whether it actually hit the building itself. However, there has been smoke billowing from the Pentagon now for, I'm guessing around 45 minutes. That is the only building in Washington so far that has actually been hit by something.
All right, because I did want to get to that. CNN had reported just a short time ago, possibly 20 minutes ago, that there was possibly another explosion in the Capitol, but you're saying that that did not happen.
I can almost for sure tell you that right now that was an unconfirmed and incorrect report about the Capitol. However, we are hearing that the State Department was evacuated possibly because of some device at the State Department. There are unconfirmed, and we have to stress that, reports that some sort of small device went off at the State Department, but that is not confirmed at this point. Most of the government buildings in Washington are being evacuated as a precaution. The only confirmed attack, because you can see the smoke billowing from the building, is the Pentagon.
We are also hearing, in fact, from Associated Press that there was a credible threat against the White House, and of course the White House being evacuated. Dave, what do you know about that?
That's the Secret Service says that the building itself was, as you just said, a credible threat to be some sort of target, as was apparently the U.S. Capitol building, as was the State Department. So most of the familiar government buildings, the Treasury building next door to the White House, the ones that aren't being officially ordered to evacuate are probably being unofficially ordered. The streets outside our building here are full of cars that aren't moving, people who are on foot. It would not be an overstatement to say I think that most people, except news people in D.C., are trying to get out of here.
Obviously a frantic scene there, as we're seeing in New York City as well. Can you tell us anything about injuries from the explosion at the Pentagon?
There are no confirmed reports of injuries at the Pentagon. It seems to me it would be very lucky, given all the smoke and the situation at the Pentagon, if no one has been injured. That would be a lucky thing, but we have no confirmed reports of this. Communications in this town, not as bad as New York, luckily, so far, but they're almost at a standstill. People are trying to call families to say they're coming home. It's just very hard to get through.
Sure, absolutely. Of course, we are awaiting President Bush's arrival in Washington, D.C. He was in Sarasota, Florida this morning.
Well, you raise a good question. I don't know where he's going. I mean, if they believe that Washington, D.C. is under attack, not to the degree, thankfully, that New York is, I don't know that we know exactly where President Bush is going. Yeah, I assume he'll be taken to a very safe location, but I don't think that would be, at this point, the White House.
Associated Press had reported earlier that he was, in fact, en route to Washington, D.C., but as you mentioned, we don't know now again if that's for sure. We're still waiting for confirmation on that. We did hear him speak a short time ago.
Well, I don't think it's alarmist to suggest that they're going to be very careful about where they take the President of the United States.
Absolutely. What else can you tell us from your vantage point in Washington, D.C.?
What I can tell you is that it is very confused, but luckily nothing on the scale here that's happening in New York. We don't have buildings collapsing. There was a plane of some kind reported to have hit the Pentagon, and while we'll get more information about how bad that is, it is in itself not as horrid as what we've been seeing in New York.
And you know, Dave, we were hearing some reports also from CNN, or perhaps from a witness who was on CNN, that said that a plane was seen over the White House, which I believe is a no-fly zone, correct?
It is. My guess is that would be whatever plane came into the Pentagon. Those of you who visited Washington, D.C. know that the Pentagon is across the Potomac River in northern Virginia. But it's only maybe a mile from the White House. I mean, it's not physically that far away. If some kamikaze-style pilot were flying low enough to hit the Pentagon, and did, that plane would have crossed, or could have crossed, over areas near the White House, because it's not that far from the White House to the Pentagon.
Of course, during extreme times such as this, when details are pouring in, it is hard to sometimes sort through them, and at times there can be a lot of speculation. But Dave, we certainly appreciate your spending time with us today.
Real quick, I'm told by one of our people here from the Dallas Morning News that that is a confirmed car bomb at the State Department. We have no word about injury, but the Morning News is saying there was some sort of car bomb. Now that, again, pales in comparison to what's been happening in other places, but there's been some sort of explosion, however minor, at the State Department.
At the State Department, which has been evacuated, correct?
Along with virtually every government building here.
Okay. Dave, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Be careful.
Thank you. You too. We have Jim Hollifield on the line now.
Yes.
From Tower Center for Political Studies. Jim, what can you tell us about this situation here?
Well, I'm sorry to say that I can't tell you all that much because like everyone else, I just heard about it this morning. But the thing I would stress, I hate to sound like a civil defense official, but clearly we all need to remain calm. It will take at least a matter of days probably to sort out exactly what has happened here. But I don't think there's any doubt that we're in the midst of the largest, most serious attack on the homeland of the United States since the Civil War. would be since the Civil War that we've seen this kind of destruction in the United States itself.
Yes. Oh, hi, Dave. Okay, I can still hear you. You've got... All right. All right. All right. I've just received word from Dave Cassidy, who again came from our Belo, Washington bureau. Dave says that part of the Pentagon has collapsed either from an explosion or a direct hit. You'll recall that it was just probably a little more than an hour ago that there was some kind of an explosion at the Pentagon. Associated Press had reported witnesses seeing an airliner possibly fly into the Pentagon, something similar to what we did see even earlier at the World Trade Center towers in New York. Again, we're still waiting for confirmation on that, but again, Dave Cassidy from our Belo, Washington bureau just reports a minute ago that part of the Pentagon collapsed from an explosion or a direct hit. We're going to try and learn a little bit more about that. Obviously, just an incredibly horrific sequence of events in what President Bush has confirmed are terrorist attacks on American cities, New York City, and of course Washington, D.C. We are seeing that airports have been shut down nationwide. All airplanes that were in the air have been asked to land immediately. International flights to New York City and Washington, D.C. were asked to be rerouted to Canada. Jim, where do we go from here as we try to, obviously very frantic right now as we try and get together and figure out what the next step is?
Well, I am sure that there is an intensive meeting going on of the National Security Team of the President of the United States, and that they will be working out an appropriate response to this. And again, I stress that it may take some time to do that. We're not going to see instantaneous action. I think the action that must be taken now is exactly what the civil defense authorities in the United States are doing, which is to try to shut everything down, secure as much of the country, anything that might be a target, and try to get people to remain as calm as they possibly can.
Well, that's a good, a good point to bring up, because right now, as we are watching these incredible images, on the air, I think a lot of us are worried possibly about loved ones who may have been flying. Of course, we have a World Trade Center here in Dallas, possibly worried about that. What security measures can be taken, and what security measures will be taken for the president as he heads back, who knows, to Washington, D.C., maybe who knows where he's heading back to now at this point?
Well, I'm sure he's going to be in a very, very secure place. I can't obviously tell you where that's going to be. But for a day, or at least for a morning, the United States has been at war. The problem, and we haven't experienced this on our homeland, as I said, for many, many years, well over 100 years. So this is going to be a new and very frightening experience for many, many Americans. And the problem, of course, is this is not a conventional war. I mean, this is not a war where we can clearly see the people who are attacking us, where we can clearly see the state or the government that is behind this. It will be very hard to identify exactly who these people are. And of course, there may be many groups around the world that would immediately want to claim responsibility for this, hoping or wishing that they could take credit for it. So we're not going to be able to strike out blindly. I know that that's going to be an enormous temptation. But it's one that we will have to avoid.
Absolutely, and what we were hearing earlier today, reading on Associated Press, was that the FBI did not receive any kind of a warning about these reported terrorist attacks, that there is no significance to the date today, September 11th.
Yep.
Of course, during extreme situations like this, as we are getting new details in literally every minute, it is tough because we don't want to speculate too much.
Right.
There was some speculation, though, and I've got to mention it, that Osama bin Laden's name was thrown out there, at least on CNN.
Well, of course, his name would be one of the first ones to come up, because we have clearly been engaged in a subterranean clandestine war with him. Whether his operation is capable of mounting something this sophisticated and this coordinated, I really don't know. But clearly, whoever was behind this took enormous planning.
Very sophisticated, very coordinated attack.
Yes, so I mean, we're not dealing with amateurs. I think that's quite clear. And unfortunately, it shows up. It shows just how vulnerable the United States homeland is to attacks of this sort.
Exactly.
Thank God that we have not seen a small nuclear weapon exploded somewhere.
Okay. And, you know, Jim, I'd like to mention on that note, here in Texas, we do have vehicles that have been posted out, DPS vehicles posted outside the Texas Capitol, of course, in Austin.
Yes.
It appears that Governor Rick Perry has canceled all of his travel plans. We are still, though, waiting for him to comment. Of course, security measures are being taken in Texas as well. Back east, we do know that troopers are heightening security because of the attacks there. We certainly thank you for your time today and your insights. Thank you, Jim Hollyfield. We have Dr. Fred Zuckner, a psychologist from the University of Dallas, on the line. Dr. Zuckner, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome, Alex.
I think, first of all, we've got to say these are tough images to watch, and for people who've been watching since this began around 8:30 this morning, and of course for those who are just tuning in, this definitely leaves your average American feeling that, boy, we thought perhaps that you think, I guess, you're untouchable, feeling very susceptible at this moment.
That feeling of safety has been shaken dramatically. And so I'm sure some people, many people, in fact, most people are probably in shock or some form of it just watching these terrible images and trying to understand the magnitude of this disaster.
An incredible sequence of horrific events beginning with the New York World Trade Center this morning. And obviously a very tough time for people who are wondering about loved ones who may have been on certain flights, who may be traveling now.
That's right.
What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, obviously they need to find out as much as they can and just wait for the information to filter out of the chaos. And I think the thing to do is to be in touch with family and others that you can reach and just get that family network, that network of friends and family and others together so that you share the strength of the family. Call on those people that you know can help and share, and then just, I think the best thing to do is wait and try to keep that communication going as much as you can.
I think it's very tough right now because we are still, we haven't even begun really to deal with the aftermath of these terrorist attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. Right now, of course, fire crews are frantically trying to get rescue efforts underway at the Pentagon, at the now collapsed World Trade Center towers. Of course, the question is eventually going to be, how do we heal the hurt now?
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Right. Well, there's of course, a condition that many people have heard about called post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. And it often will come up as a result of something as horrific as this. In fact, that's part of the definition. A survivor, someone who has witnessed or been part of something as tremendously upsetting as this kind of event. And that the symptoms of that condition take many forms. Flashbacks to this kind of thing, just remembrances of the images that one has seen, psychic numbing, loss of affect. Persons can't experience joy because of the impact that it's had on their psyche. And these things take time to sort out. And people who have suffered directly from this obviously should be in treatment as quickly as they can, mm-hmm. seek some professional help to help them go through this. One of the best things, as I mentioned earlier, though, is just working with family and friends. Right. Staying in touch with those who are sharing the grief. That helps more than anything.
You know, Dr. Zucker, I don't know about you, but as we view these horrific images, I can't help but flash back to the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, right. Of course.
And the World Trade Center bombing,
and of course, the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, which did kill 6 people. But again, we had those images of the Oklahoma City bombing. And of course, a slightly different situation as that was, we know now, done by an American.
Right.
What did we learn from that situation that could possibly in any way be applied here? And what are the implications going to be for our country after this terrorist attack?
Well, I think as we mentioned earlier, one of the things that will be shaken most profoundly is our sense of safety. Right. That we somehow, because of geography, because of technology, because of our sophistication, that somehow we're immune to these kinds of things. This, of course, negates that thinking. It makes us realize how vulnerable we are. And I think that's going to have that's something that, as a nation, psychologically we'll have to deal with, as well as individually.
Well, right now, obviously feeling quite vulnerable in Texas. Street access to the state capitol building has been shut down. People are still in the Capitol and still walking around the Capitol. We have had no comment yet from Governor Rick Perry, but we can tell you on our home front that he has canceled all of his travel plans. We can also tell you that extra security vehicles have been posted outside the Capitol in Austin, heightening security here in Texas. Again, out of fear that vulnerability that you know, after seeing what we saw today, you certainly never know.
That's right.
Any parting thoughts, Dr. Zucker?
I think, as I said earlier, I would just encourage people who are close to this, who may have family involved in this, that they should rally around one another and just provide the kind of support that only families and loved ones can give until the details are known. It may be some time before that happens. I think the waiting may be the most difficult thing to do. And I would just encourage folks to be in touch with those who can help them. Ministers, clergy, others who have that kind of skill, I think should be available. If we can do that, obviously we're going to be doing that for our students here at the University of Dallas, and I would encourage all of us in those professions to be available, to be on call, to help when they're needed.
Dr. Zucker, we certainly thank you for your insights this morning, for spending some time with us. Certainly do appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Zucker. Let's go ahead and listen in again to CNN.
Washington. But we do know that another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh, or at least to the southeast of Pittsburgh. Rose Arce, one of our producers here in New York, joins us on the phone. Rose, what do you have that's new?
Yes, just a while ago, I think you saw that collapse of the top of the World Trade Center. Well, it looks like a large chunk of that debris has hit a building very close by, about 2 blocks away next to an elementary school, causing another explosion. So for the last few minutes, I've been watching people running from that direction. There was one man, I'm not child, but you saw on the street. I've seen several emergency service workers carrying other emergency service workers from the scene. There's a haze everywhere. It's very, very difficult to see, but there has been the whole area has been covered by soot and ash. So it looks almost like snow. So as people are coming up the street running from the scene of this new explosion, you can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with us. Terrific work. Let me throw another couple of pieces of information out as we continue to put this all together into a straight line if we can. The United Nations has been evacuated. The United Nations building on the east side of Manhattan has been evacuated. The city is in, this is election day, a primary election for mayor and city council races here in New York. That election has been postponed until further notice. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe that started about 8:45 Eastern Time here in New York when one plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. About a half an hour after that, as people were converging, as fire and police and rescue teams were converging on the scene, a second plane appeared to the west of the Trade Center buildings and slammed into the second tower. That's what you just saw. Fire shooting out the north and east side of the tower. Shortly after that, we began to get reports of events taking place in Washington. An explosion which first came to us as a fire at the Pentagon. Now there's a report of a second hijacked plane heading towards the Pentagon. It is believed that one of the planes, perhaps both, but one of them, we have been told, was an American Airlines 767 that hit one of the Trade Center towers. About a half an hour after that, perhaps a little bit longer, lose track of time a little bit in these situations, the first tower, or let me correct that, the south tower, the second tower, the one to the left, collapsed. It collapsed in a cascade of smoke and spark. And what we cannot tell you is if there was a second explosion that caused that collapse, or if it was simply, that's the first one. That's the south tower collapsing. And that was about a half hour, give or take, after the planes hit the tower. Then shortly after that, just as the smoke was starting to clear away, the second tower, and that's what you're looking at now. Again, this was not very long ago, 10, 15 minutes ago. The second tower, it almost looks like one of those implosions of buildings that you see, except there is nothing controlled about this. This is devastation. How many people? There are 50,000 people who normally go to work in the Trade Center buildings. How many of those people had arrived already? How many of those people were trapped on the upper stories? How many of those people have been hurt? How many of those people died? We cannot tell you now. We can tell you that hospitals throughout the New York area are receiving literally hundreds of patients. And they are performing triage. They are trying to figure out who could be treated, who needs help first. This is sort of standard operating procedure. We are just being told now that Israel has evacuated all its diplomatic missions around the world. Israel has evacuated its missions. We are told now that Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks, and we don't know yet who's behind them. Britain has condemned these attacks. Germany has convened its National Security Council, and we will check and see if events are going on in those places or if that is simply a reaction to what has gone on here in Washington and in New York. CNN's Gene Meserve joins us on the phone from Washington. Gene.
Hay Street, which is one of the major thoroughfares here in Washington, it is absolute gridlock. It takes about...
We are now about to be joined by Eileen Hawley from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Eileen, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Eileen, I understand that about 5,000 employees there are about to be evacuated from the building. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, fortunately, nothing is going on here in Houston. We've received no threats of any kind against the Johnson Space Center, but in the light of today's activities against government employees and government facilities, we're taking the prudent course of action here. We are closing the center, and we are sending all of our employees home.
Eileen, this is Tracy Johnson with TXCN. We also have received word that there is a space shuttle in orbit, and what's interesting is that we were hearing that as it was passing over like the New York area, it could actually see what was taking place.
You know, I don't know. It's actually the International Space Station, which is always in orbit. Currently, we do have a 3-person crew on board the space station. I have not heard from them if they actually could see any of the damage, and I'm being told now that, yes, they could see the damage. They have, of course, been advised of what is going on currently here on the ground, and they have been advised that everyone is evacuating the center here in Houston as a safety measure.
Well, Eileen, by closing the control center, what does that mean for the space shuttle that is in orbit? Is that affected in any way, or?
No, the space station will be just fine. Honestly, I could not tell you whether we will maintain a skeleton staff here. They can also maintain communications through the control center that's located outside of Moscow because, of course, this is an international partnership. So their activities will largely be unaffected by all of this, and we will continue to give them information because they're going to have a keen interest in this.
Eileen, as your thousands of employees are evacuated there from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, of course, what is the feeling there among the employees?
I think, along with everyone else throughout the country, they're probably stunned and outraged by the attack. Things here are very calm. People are simply, we've told all of our folks that they need to go home. They need to check with friends and family on the East Coast. If they feel like they need to do that, we're offering, of course, the assistance of our employee assistance program for employees who are deeply affected by this. But by and large, there's no sense of panic here. There's no sense of urgency. This is just, it's the prudent thing to do. We owe our employees that level of care.
Absolutely. Eileen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And, of course, there are some other safety precautions that are being taken in Texas in the wake of this sequence of terrorist attacks and destruction. Streets leading to the Capitol in Austin have been shut down. Governor Rick Perry has canceled his travel plans. Heightened security there, of course, as well as we just learned that at the World Trade Center in Dallas, that they have asked their employees to leave. Again, as Eileen Hawley was reiterating, that there was no threat here, but it's just, again, a security measure that they do want to take.
Absolutely. And then we also have word that a large plane has crashed. That was just about around 10 a.m. Now that's Eastern time about 8 miles east of Jennerstown. There was a 911 report that came in, and that airport is about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. And that's all the information that we have at this time. Of course, we'll bring you more as we are aware of the situation there in Pennsylvania.
And of course, President Bush was in Sarasota, Florida this morning reading to some school children when he first learned the news. He did get a chance to speak about what he has said now are terrorist attacks. As for Governor Rick Perry, we have learned that he'll be speaking around noon, and of course we'll try and carry that live for you here on Texas Cable News. I want to talk a little bit about what President Bush said as he is now on his way, perhaps back to Washington, D.C. But he said that, of course, terrorist attacks will not be tolerated. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack.